Chapter 12-18. 2 days later, the moment that Victor had been waiting for finally arrived. The premiere of The Dust of Annihilation was scheduled to start at 3 p.m. He arrived at the entrance of the theater early and waited for the tickets to be checked in. After a year, the theater, which was specially built for the magic movie, had expanded a lot. Not only did it add several viewing rooms, but it also added a waiting hall and a courtyard outside. Although he arrived an hour earlier, there were still many people gathered in the waiting hall. "You must be Mr. Gammon from the Crescent Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce. Nice to meet you. You're flattering me. I didn't expect to meet a big businessman from the Kingdom of Dawn here. Please take care of me in the future. Isn't that the star of Cajun Troupe standing over there? I wonder if I can meet the master in person. If you know him, please introduce me to him." Of course. The crowd gathered in twos and threes and chatted with each other. As he had expected, those who could afford to pay dozens of Golden Dragon tickets were basically upper-class celebrities. This was also one of the hidden values of the premiere tickets. "Oh, isn't this Mr. Victor? I heard that you're no longer in the jewelry business." Someone in the crowd occasionally recognized him. "I'm still in the jewelry business. It's just that things aren't going well these days. I like the new bedding that your Chamber of Commerce released. After I changed it in the hotel, the number of customers increased. I want to order another 100 sets. Thank you for your affirmation. We can arrange a place to talk in detail after the magic movie." "Okay, that's a deal." Ling Long was left speechless upon hearing this. It was probably unimaginable for her to be able to casually reach a deal worth hundreds of gold royals. When no one spoke, she quietly tugged at the corner of Victor's clothes and asked, "Sir, are these people here to watch the magic movie or to talk about business? And I saw that you didn't know many of them before. Aren't you afraid that they'll cheat you?" "Don't worry. This is common for businessmen. You'll get used to it." Victor smiled. After all, businessmen who were willing to buy premiere tickets were a kind of strength in themselves. Once they stepped into this circle, they would be able to gain the recognition of others to a large extent. The magic movie wasn't a real thing, so nothing would be left after watching it. Therefore, in a sense, it was more convincing than a full set of jewelry. Just as he was walking and explaining, he suddenly bumped into someone passing by. "Ah, I'm sorry." Victor noticed that the other party was a woman, so he apologized first. However, when he saw the person who was hit, he couldn't help but be stunned. It was a lifeless face. Her facial features were not bad. If she dressed herself up a little, she would probably be better than Ling Long. But his pale complexion and empty eyes almost ruined everything. People could not help but feel disgusted. Such a gloomy expression was really incompatible with the atmosphere in the hall. The woman didn't say anything. She just glanced at him and continued to walk forward expressionlessly. "What a weirdo," Victor muttered to himself. "Sir." Ling Long, who completely did not notice this scene, grabbed his hand and shouted, "The magic movie is about to start. Let's go in." "Ah yes." Victor shook his head, put aside his unhappiness, and followed Ling Long to the viewing room. "What happened just now?" Joe looked at Farina worriedly. "Nothing," Farina said in a low voice. "Someone just didn't pay attention to the road. Let's go. Since you brought me here, don't just stand there." "Why, you're right." Joe hesitated to take her hand, but in the end he could not reach it out. "Don't forget, no matter what, I'm always by your side." Farina did not answer. Following him here was the greatest reward she could give. It had been nearly half a year since she came to Neverwinter. Those ancient witches who claimed to have come from more than 400 years ago did not lie. Her injuries gradually healed, and she could now walk on her own. Although she still had whip wounds and brand marks on her body, Farina did not complain. If she were a witch who had fallen into the hands of the church, her fate would have been a million times worse. What else could she say if she was willing to do this for the enemy? However, the expected trial did not come. Even the king of Grey Castle did not see her. He only sent someone to ask her dozens of questions. She deliberately lied to some of the questions to provoke the king's anger, but what she got in return was a faint sneer. When she was released from prison, Joe bought a house and settled her there. Unlike her, Joe, who used to be a noble, quickly found a job in the administrative office and quickly adapted to his new identity. In other words, he should not have been a member of the church in the first place. However, this did not bring about a change for Farina. On the contrary, it was a kind of torture. The longer she stayed in Neverwinter and the more she knew about the city, the more she realized the church's mistake. Witches had nothing to do with the demons of hell. Except for magic power, they were no different from ordinary people. Roland Wimbledon, who used the power of witches, did not turn his city into a devil's den. Even a blind man could not deny the prosperity of this city. On one hand, she had been loyal to the church for half of her life, and on the other hand, she was denied everything she had done. The two conflicting thoughts made Farina very painful. Perhaps this was a trial in itself, and sometimes it was even more torturous than torture. If Joe did not need her, she would have already committed suicide. Even so, Farina did not know how long she could hold on. She had a feeling that the 2 tickets sent by the Starflower Troupe would be the last straw that broke the camel's back. Cajun Fells must have been commissioned by Roland to write this script. His purpose was undoubtedly to completely change the public's view of the church and further consolidate the throne of the Wimbledon family. She could already imagine that from now on, the church would be despised by everyone. Lord Tucker Thor's last effort, and the countless Judgment Army soldiers who had sacrificed themselves on the city wall would all become a joke. Farina did not want to see this moment coming, but she still accepted Joe's invitation. It was just like how she despised the higher-ups of the church who had fled, but still accepted their request to stand up and stabilize the order in Hermes. It was because she was needed by Joe. However, this was probably the last thing she could do to repay him. The lights dimmed. When the whole viewing room was shrouded in darkness, the magic movie began. The story began more than 300 years ago in Hermes Plateau. The new holy city was still a piece of stone. The scene flitted across the steep mountain wall, over a vast expanse of snow, and then a panoramic view of the great breach of the impassable mountain range. Although he had watched the magic movie many times before, Victor still felt a tremor in his heart when he saw the scene of overlooking the earth appear before his eyes. On the other side of the great breach, he saw many believers busily building their new city, as if this was the world of 300 years ago. After a while, the scene shifted to the earth again, and fell vertically into a huge pit. Under the introduction of the narration, Victor heard the name of the core organization of the church, the Privy Council, for the first time. From the whispers around him, he could tell that other people felt the same way. Starting from an unknown secret was the most attractive topic. Coupled with the fact that in the past only the royal family had the right to know the history, the audience was even more interested. Soon, Victor's attention was completely drawn to the story. It was said that every 400 years, the world would usher in a disaster. At that time, the huge bloody moon would hang high in the sky, and countless enemies would pour out from hell to devour the human kingdoms. In order to survive, the witches entrusted their hopes to an extraordinary power, which required the fusion of the witch's blood and the warrior's soul to cast a steel body that was not afraid of magic and pain. The gods' punishment warriors. To ensure the implementation of the plan, the witches established a church and began to select and train qualified candidates. The main character of the story was a witch, who was also the next pope of the church. The other important character was the pope's guardian, and the commander of the Judgment Army. As in most dramas, after a period of time, the two of them went from despising each other to recognizing each other, and falling in love with each other. Gradually, they became inseparable lovers. The witches and the guardian even promised that when they found a successor to the pope, they would undergo the gods' punishment army transformation ceremony together, and become inseparable. Cajun Fells tactfully told the story of their relationship, both in terms of presentation and lines, which were the culmination of decades of acting skills. Coupled with the excellent performance of the Starflower Troupe, the audience was deeply moved. Tinkle even cried softly because of the promise made by the two. However, the plot took a sharp turn. Tempted by power, the guardian's father framed the current pope and put the crown on his head. As the successor, the witch naturally became the thorn in his side. He ordered his son to hand over the head of the witch, but the guardian flatly refused. The rebellion had been planned for a long time. When the rebels lifted the curtain, it was already too late. In desperation, the two chose to escape from Hermes and tried to bring the news to the king under the plateau. The guardian's father also lost his last shred of apprehension and sent his bodyguards to intercept them. Obviously, he had no intention of letting them live. The climax of the plot unfolded at Coldwind Ridge in Grey Castle. A group of Judgment Army soon caught up with the witch and the guardian. Since they were outnumbered, the death of the two seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Just when Victor could not bear to watch it any longer, something incredible happened. "Please help us, I beg you." The guardian, who was panting, suddenly turned around and grabbed Victor's arm. The hardness and coldness of the gauntlet were transmitted to Victor's body through his clothes. At that moment, an indescribable tremor rose from his feet and spread all over his body. He could not help but scream, "Over there! Take them down! Anyone who resists will be regarded as an accomplice and will be killed." The pursuers shouted and raised their crossbows. I'm not." Victor's throat was dry, and he couldn't finish his sentence. The Judgment Warrior on the other side had already pulled the trigger. A crossbow bolt almost grazed his cheek as it flew past. At the same time, he felt a slight pain. Victor touched his cheek with trembling hands and put his fingers in front of his eyes. Chapter 12:19. Farina was surprised to find that the straw was still there. Although it was only a few feet away from her, it did not press down on her. The background of the magic movie was similar to the history of the ancient tequila witches, but it did not completely deny the church. When she saw the people in the drama risking their lives to fight against the enemies of hell, she even felt a surge of heat in her body that she had not felt for a long time. When the Hermes in the magic movie suddenly rebelled, she clenched her fists tightly and wanted to beat them to the ground one by one. It was these people that caused the church to forget its original purpose of being established. From being needed by people, it became a giant beast that devoured people. The most hateful thing was that those in power who knew the inside story kept their mouths shut about the existence of the devil, but at the same time, they trained the followers with the idea of saving the world. This caused countless warriors like Lord Tucker Thor to die with a noble faith, but they did not realize that they were just tools for them to control power. She should not be loyal to such Hermes. The question was, why did the king of Grey Castle reveal this side of the church? Did he really not want to take this opportunity to completely drive the church into the abyss? Or did he not care about these things at all? Just when Farina was in turmoil, the pursuer sent by Hermes caught her attention. Even if it was a few minutes earlier, she would not have any reaction. For a person in despair, no matter what happened around her, it had nothing to do with her. But now, there was a wave in her heart, and the strength of the past seemed to have returned a little. Farina herself was an elite of the Judgment Army, and this change was enough for her to notice the strangeness. The ground trembled slightly. This was the sound of the Judgment Army galloping. She had been in Hermes for 5 or 6 years, so she was already very familiar with this kind of movement. Even without her eyes, she could judge the number and distance of the pursuers. 16 riders, 2 squads, the same number of pursuers in front of her. If the touch had been there from the beginning, she might have ignored it. However, the demon shadow was only a fictional illusion. No matter how realistic it was, it couldn't replace reality. For example, if he lowered his head, he wouldn't be able to see his own body, and his touch would still be dependent on his surroundings. It was precisely because of this that the sudden additional feeling was particularly obvious. She realized that something had changed. As this thought popped up, Farina saw her own body. What was going on? However, the most incredible thing was yet to come. The spectators around her also appeared in front of her one by one. Charles was no exception. "Farina, what are we?" He turned around with a confused look on his face. A very bad feeling welled up in her heart. Farina suddenly grabbed backwards, but she didn't touch anything. The chair that she was sitting on was no longer there. "Please help us, I beg you." The guardian and the witch seemed to have discovered their presence, and ran towards the crowd in a panic. "The defectors are there, take them down. Anyone who resists will be treated as accomplices, and will be killed without mercy." Crossbow bolts flew over and shot several people in the front row to the ground. Most of the spectators were directors of the Chamber of Commerce and dignitaries from aristocratic families. Almost none of them had ever been in a battle. In the face of such a sudden change, all of them were stunned. Damn it! Farina cursed in a low voice. What the hell were those witches doing? Was this still an illusion? If it was before, she would have shouted, "This is an evil trap set by the witches. Everyone follow me." To calm people down, resisting the subconscious impulse, she pushed Charles away and quickly rushed to the front of the crowd. "Stop. I'm Farina, the captain of the Vanguard Battalion of the Judgment Army. Who are you?" This unexpected shout made the pursuers stop their horses. "Vanguard Battalion? How come I've never heard of this team? Hey, who's your commander?" "The Archbishop of the Privy Council, Lord Taifun." Farina made up a story. At the same time, she put her hand behind her back and made a "give me a weapon" gesture to the defected guardian. What? Hearing this answer, the leading warrior showed a hesitant look. Sure enough, as the mastermind of the rebellion, the guard had heard of the Privy Council. All the high-level people who were involved in the core secrets of the church should have a lot of influence in the church. But she also knew that this could only make the opponent hesitate for a moment, but it could not change his mind. The rebellion had been successful. Even if the archbishop had a high position and power, he could not be compared to the newly crowned pope. She had to seize the opportunity and make the first move. Unfortunately, the guardian didn't fully understand her gesture. He just carefully raised his sword and stood beside her. "Why aren't you wearing the armor of the Judgment Army?" The leader of the pursuers probably made a decision. He dismounted from his horse and slowly surrounded her with his men. "Because I'm carrying out a special task," Farina calmly replied. "Sorry, because the defected is too important, I have to bring him back to Hermes. This is the order of His Holiness. In addition, your men had better come with me. Lord Taifun must understand the order of His Holiness. Do you have to do this?" "Yes." The leader put his hand on the hilt of his sword. "Okay, then I'll go with you." Farina sighed. As for Lord Taifun, what happened to him? He's already dead. While speaking, she quickly pulled out the spare dagger from the waist of the guardian and inserted it into the gap of the helmet of the leader. After more than 300 years, blood suddenly sprayed on her face. Captain. Kill them." Farina grabbed the weapon of the leader and fought with the pursuers. At this time, the guardian also waved his sword and joined the battle. "This woman is so strong. Damn, where's the crossbow? Hurry up and load it. Don't let the witch go." The scene was chaotic. From time to time, some people groaned and fell to the ground. The rest of the audience fell into a state of sluggishness and did not dare to move. For Farina, this was a battle where she had no chance of winning. Even if she could knock down her opponent, it would be difficult for her to inflict fatal damage. Furthermore, she was outnumbered 16-2. It was only a matter of time before she was cut down by the swords. After a few rounds of fighting, she had many wounds on her body, but the burning pain did not slow her down. Instead, it made her more and more eager to fight. Farina felt a long-lost satisfaction. "How dare you go against the church?" the pursuing guard roared. "The church? No, you don't deserve to mention that name." She glared at them. "It shouldn't be like this. You destroyed it with your own hands. You've let too many people down." Yes, she would soon die here, but Farina found that this was the best ending for her. Even if it was only for a short moment, she finally became the kind of person she wanted to be. But death did not come as expected. A rapid gunshot broke the sound of swords clashing. She turned around and found that the men in black who had been guarding outside the courtyard had appeared in the magic shadow. Their reinforcements turned the situation around. The enemies seemed to be scared out of their wits. They abandoned the bodies of their companions, turned around and fled, and soon disappeared into the mountains. "Thank you." The wounded guardian walked to Farina with the help of the witch. "I thought the church was completely under my father's control. I didn't expect to meet an upright warrior like you. I thought there was no hope, but it seems that God has not given up on us." The witch still had tears on her face, but now she smiled and said, "You've not only saved us, all humans owe you one." Farina opened her mouth but did not know what to say. We're going to Grey Castle and tell the king about the changes on the Hermes Plateau. I hope it's not too late, the guardian said solemnly. You should go too. Don't go back to the holy city. If one day the church can return to the right track, I think we'll meet again. Take care, my friend. After watching the two slowly leave, her vision darkened. When the light returned to normal, she found herself still sitting in the viewing room, and the chair behind her was still firm. Even the wounds she had suffered in the battle had disappeared. So, what she had seen just now was really an illusion. Oh my, this is amazing! At this moment, the audience finally came back to their senses, and the viewing room suddenly burst into a deafening uproar. By the three gods, I feel like I'm changing history. You're indeed a master of drama. To be able to watch such a magic shadow, not to mention 50 golden dragon, even 100 golden dragon would be worth it. When you rushed up, I was scared to death. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. Joe patted his chest and said, It's incredible that you can come up with such a scene and make the people in the play look so real. Farina did not answer. She noticed that the men in black were nervous and looking around with guns in their hands, which did not seem to be arranged beforehand. There were also 2 theater staff who directly rushed backstage, looking flustered and surprised. This did not seem to be the behavior of a successful performance. When she held her breath and tried to further capture the details, she suddenly heard a faint explosion, which seemed to come from far away. At the same time, people's screams, cries, and curses also sounded intermittently, but it seemed insignificant in the incessant discussions and praises in the room. This is not right. Farina realized that something was wrong. She suddenly stood up, ignoring Joe's surprised gaze, and ran over the heads of the audience in the back row to the viewing room. Stop. You wait. Noticing this scene, the men in black wanted to stop her, but it was obviously a step too late. Farina ran through the hall, out of the courtyard, and then froze beside the receiving road. Neverwinter had already fallen into chaos. People were running and shouting everywhere, and several residential areas were billowing thick smoke, as if a fire had broken out. In the direction of the industrial area, there were continuous explosions, and the whole city seemed to be out of control. But what was more terrible than all this was coming from above. Chapter 12:20. The citizens of Neverwinter were not the only ones who witnessed this amazing scene. Earlier, Marjorie had been standing on the bow of the Snow Wind, gazing at the end of the vast blue sea. It was the 66th day since the fleet had crossed the Sealine. The waves were always surging in the direction they came from. Sometimes they were high, sometimes they were low. The frequency of the changes was almost the same as the tides in the Shadow Sea thousands of miles away. It seemed that the waves all came from the same place. If the swirling sea did have a source, it must be the greatest discovery in history. Apart from the guiding waves, the other thing that filled Karina with confidence was the Snow Wind. The Snow Wind, which did not rely on sails, allowed it to travel in strong winds and waves without worrying about being overturned. Its huge load also allowed it to replenish water and food for the other ships. It was the first time that the fleet had traveled so far from the mainland, but none of the ships had been left behind. It was all thanks to the Snow Wind that they had spent a lot of money on. She had reason to believe that Thunder would not return empty-handed. Did you find anything? A familiar voice suddenly came from behind her. Marjorie turned around with a smile and said, If there was something, the first person to inform you would be the lookouts on the mast. You should ask them. It was the leader of the fleet, Thunder. Not necessarily, Roland said heartily. They might have already found it, but they were so shocked that they said they were mute or lame. Marjorie covered her mouth to stop herself from bursting into laughter. Roland was talking about the scene when the fleet crossed the Sealine. When the sea rose like a vertical wall in front of them, even the most experienced sailors were stunned by the incredible scene. When they crossed the Sealine, some of them even fell off the watchtower due to the sudden change in the environment. Usually, these veterans could stick to the cables and masts like geckos even in a storm. But this time, they slipped and fell in a calm situation. It was enough to show the shock that the Sealine brought to them. Thunder shrugged. As far as I know, The other chambers of commerce changed the lookouts with the best eyesight and replaced them with the most courageous ones. After all, it's too embarrassing to tell others about this. Is there such a thing? Marjorie shook her head helplessly. But after seeing such a spectacle, I think no matter what they discover, they won't lose their composure like before. Who knows? Thunder patted her shoulder and said in a calm voice, "Don't worry. Joan will be fine." Marjorie also stopped smiling and nodded vigorously. Yes, the sea is her world. I think she will reunite with us somewhere. When navigating the boundless sea, it was important to have an optimistic attitude. Rather than worrying pointlessly, it was a more mature response to continue moving towards the goal. Marjorie was naturally aware of this. By the way, I'm here because the sailing meeting is about to begin. After a moment of silence, Thunder tilted his head and said, "The other captains are all here. Let's go back to the cabin." Okay, I got it. The sailing meeting was where all the captains of the fleet gathered on the flagship to report and communicate on the next route, the status of the ship, and the status of the resources. Generally, it was held every 3 or 4 days, and was the key to ensuring the overall health of the fleet. Just as the two of them turned around and took a few steps, they saw a strange red reflection on the dark blue sea. The sailors on the deck were also stunned, their eyes looking in the same direction as if they had seen something inconceivable. In the distance, several people fell from the top of the mast of the 3-masted ship and landed in the midst of the stunned crowd. It was as if they had crossed the seal line again. Much to Margaret's amazement. Didn't they say that? These people have been replaced by the most courageous ones? The female merchant slowly turned her head back and instantly felt the blood in her body freeze. She saw a huge celestial body in the cloudless blue sky. It was round and bright red, dozens of times larger than the sun. But a few seconds ago, there was nothing there. The 3 gods. Bless us, she murmured. Is this the bloody moon that His Majesty mentioned? However, Marjorie did not get any response. The scene was so strange and horrible that even Thunder was speechless. Woo, woo. Just then the snow wind sounded its whistle. The sharp buzzing sound broke the dead silence on the scene and brought everyone back to their senses. The whistle sounded, which meant that enemies were approaching. The two looked at each other and ran to the bridge at the same time. What the hell happened? Thunder shouted as he rushed into the command room. There's a ship, the first mate stammered. From the southeast. It's coming toward us. What did you say? Thunder snatched the telescope from the first mate's hand and aimed it at the direction the first mate had pointed out. Marjorie's heart sank. They were now thousands of miles away from the Shadow Sea. Even birds were rarely seen, let alone humans. How could there be a ship? This was a new sea that no human had ever set foot in. She asked another adjutant for the telescope and looked in the direction Thunder was looking at. Oh my God! The female merchant gasped. She saw 2 shadows floating on the sea in the distance. They did not have sails, but they were riding the waves. But this was not the most horrifying thing. The water around the shadows seemed to be boiling, as if countless fish were following them. But she soon found that the surging things were not fish, but something that sea merchants and explorers did not want to see. Sea ghosts. The fins on their backs appeared and disappeared from time to time. Occasionally, they would jump out of the water, and the waves that rose up reflected a strange luster under the crimson moon, which reminded Margaret of the scene of sharks fighting for food. Pass my order. Turn all the ships to full rudder. Thunder roared. Pull up the sails and move forward at full speed. The rest of you, get ready for battle. Yes. We're in trouble. The captain of the Tuna swallowed hard. May the sea god bless us, the other captains prayed. Everyone in the fjords knew that unless it was a light and fast boat, or if it was sailing with the wind and the current, ships could not outrun the sea ghosts. This meant that if the sea ghosts came for them, it was only a matter of time before they caught up. But the situation was clearly deteriorating for the worse. As the distance between them shortened, Marjorie finally saw the real appearance of the 2 shadows. Half of them looked like ships, and the other half was made of flesh and blood. They looked like monsters with their skin peeled off, leaving only their internal organs and skeletons. Such creatures often only appeared in the worst nightmares. When the ribs covering the upper half of the ship opened up, they began to spray dark green objects at the fleet. The distance was more than 10 miles. The water column caused by the objects falling into the sea frightened everyone. Although none of the ships had been hit, there was no doubt that everyone was willing to try to see what it was. Thunder's face was gloomy as he gave the second order. Abandon all food and exploration materials, only keep half of the water. No, 30% is fine too. Speed up the fleet as soon as possible. Marjorie was stunned. In this way, we can't go deeper into the sea. And if we only keep so little water, I'm afraid that the return trip will be. The first mate said with a troubled expression. Chapter 12:21. The Kingdom of Everwinter Snow Reflection Castle. My lord, Grey Castle's army has retreated. When a guard rushed into the castle hall excitedly and announced the latest news, all the nobles fixed their eyes on him. Are you sure? Earl Marwain slapped the armrest of his chair and stood up abruptly. Yes, more than one spy said so. The guard nodded and said, someone saw with his own eyes that their camp was emptied overnight. They even abandoned a lot of rations. These people finally scram. The Count couldn't help but laugh, his mood suddenly relaxed. A month ago, the people of Grey Castle suddenly appeared in the 4 port cities of the Kingdom of Everwinter, and rapidly expanded their territory. They did not compromise, neither did they accept surrenders, nor did they accept tributes. Wherever they went, they almost wiped out the population. This plague of barbarism was even more terrifying than the church. At least the church could communicate with them. The reason given by the people of Grey Castle was also extremely absurd. They said that the bloody moon would bring disaster, and that they had to leave as soon as possible. What a joke! This land was left to him by his grandfather's grandfather. No one could take it away from him, not the church, not Grey Castle. My lord, you are wise, an old scholar said respectfully. The so-called full moon, missing moon, dark moon, and crimson moon are all astronomical phenomena that will appear at regular intervals. If they want to believe that this is an ominous sign, it's their business. As long as you don't move, they can't do anything to you. That's right. The cliffs around Snow Reflection Castle are your greatest asset. If the people of Grey Castle are willing to negotiate, we can make concessions. The church was also aggressive at first, but in the end, they still made you a bishop. The others echoed. Earl Marwain's confidence grew. He looked at the strange phenomenon outside the window. His initial fear had long since disappeared, and he even felt a trace of admiration for it. Had it not been for the change 3 days ago, the people of Grey Castle would have pushed their front line to the center of the Kingdom of Everwinter in about a month, and the Snow Reflection Castle would inevitably be affected. Although the barbarians rarely attacked the cities of the nobles, and would ignore them as long as they did not interfere with their actions, they could not ignore the fact that they had violated the property of the nobles by plundering the population. If the barbarians really wiped out the cities around the cities, they would suffer during the months of demons. Indeed, just as the vassals said, the city itself was his greatest asset. It was located in the north of the king's city, situated on a precipice. The surrounding area was sunken very deeply, forming a natural island on land. The widest part of the fissure was several miles wide, while the narrowest part was about 100 feet wide. Only a rope bridge could pass through. The area in the center of the crack was large enough to accommodate several cities. The ancestors had built the castle on the island, because it was easy to defend and difficult to attack. The Snow Reflection Castle had never been conquered since it was built. Although the Church of Hermes had conquered the entire Kingdom of Everwinter in a very short time, they had failed to attack the Snow Reflection Castle. Instead, they sent messengers to negotiate with him, claiming that as long as he was loyal to the church, he could continue to control the place. In the Earl's eyes, this was what a normal person would do. That was why he had kept quiet, and wanted to get a good price from the barbarians. However, the conditions that Wimbledon offered were unacceptable. Earl Marwain was not worried that the people of Grey Castle and the demons would attack the city. There was nothing more reliable than a steep cliff. However, the city also needed supplies from the surrounding towns. Even if the snow reflection castle was filled with warehouses filled with resources, and could last until the day the enemy gave up, once the population was completely captured, the resources that had been used up could never be recovered. Fortunately, they were scared out of their wits by the bloody moon. Mr. Sack, what should I do next? Marwain looked at the old scholar. He, of course, take the initiative to attack, the latter said while stroking his long beard. The Earl's face immediately stiffened. Defending the snow reflection castle and going out to cause trouble were two different things. If not for this natural barrier, he would not have dared to contend against the King of Grey Castle even if he had 10 times the courage. Don't be afraid. I'm not talking about the people of Grey Castle. I'm talking about the territories they've looted. Think about it, the scouts mentioned that the enemy was scattered. There were only about 100 people in a small team. What could they take away? Marwain's eyes lit up. You mean? The old scholar nodded with a smile. The people who were captured must have left behind a lot of things. If we follow the route of the people of Grey Castle, we should be able to pick up some things. For example, food that was very difficult to carry. The more Marwain thought about it, the more excited he became. He summoned his chief knight. When he was about to give the order, another guard suddenly rushed into the hall. My lord. There's a demon outside the city. What demon? The Earl stared at him with displeasure. Even you believe the nonsense of the people of Grey Castle? Forgive me. My lord, but it. The guard's voice was hoarse. But it's not human. Not human? Everyone could not help but look at each other. Marwain's heart skipped a beat, but as the lord, he had to remain calm. In that case, take me to see it. The Earl suppressed his anxiety and deliberately put on a straight face. I want to see what the people living in hell look like. Even so, when he walked up the city wall, he had already put on the best armor and the largest god's stone of retaliation. More than 10 personal guards surrounded him, forming a shield wall around him with their thick and heavy shields. However, the moment he saw the demon, Marwain could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. This time his men were right. The so-called demon was indeed only one person. It was not standing at the narrowest part of the crack, nor was it the weakest point of the city wall. Instead, it was simply standing on a protruding rock pillar, slightly higher than the top of the city wall. A little further ahead was the bottomless ice abyss. The patrolling knight had already ordered his squires to set up the crossbow bed and aim the arrows at the target. After a moment of careful observation, Marwain found that the demon indeed did not look like a human. Although it also had hands and feet, it was much taller than ordinary people. Its skin was azure, and he could see the bulging meridians and blood vessels. The most obvious difference was the tentacles on its cheeks, jaw, and elbows. Those disgusting, earthworm-like tentacles were slowly wriggling, which made Marwain's hair stand on end. What puzzled him was that the demon's eyes were closed, as if it was asleep. He could not sense any threat from it at all. Was this demon really attracted by the bloody moon? No. That's just a story the people of Grey Castle used to scare the ignorant villagers, the Earl thought. No matter where it came from, it had nothing to do with the rumored doomsday. On the contrary, as long as he ordered his men to pull the lever, this guy would be shot by a crossbow. Thinking of this, Marwain took a deep breath and shouted, "Listen up, you ugly and filthy monster. I'm the Lord of Snow Reflection Castle, Marwain Casso. You've invaded my territory. If you want to live, kneel down and surrender to me. That's your only choice. Otherwise, the ice abyss under your feet will be your burial ground." He did not think that the demon could understand what he was saying. His speech was not so much a warning to the demon, but rather a show of bravery and fearlessness to his men on the city wall. Since the people of Grey Castle believed that this was a demon from hell, if he could scare off or kill one, it would definitely increase his reputation. "I don't have the patience to wait for too long. I'll give you 5 seconds to make your choice." 5-4. As he spoke, Marwain gestured to the knight that he was ready to shoot. 3. The demon suddenly opened its eyes and shouted, "Enough!" Chapter 12:22. This guy can actually speak the human language. When the Count was helped up by his guards, He felt his face burning, and his expression was rather ugly. He had intended to show off his power in front of his subordinates and at the same time build up the confidence of the other nobles, but he did not expect to be frightened to the ground by a roar. What was even more embarrassing was that the other party was only one person. Damn it, I'm going to kill this bastard. Marwain gritted his teeth and raised his hand. When he was about to give the order to shoot, the old scholar suddenly pulled him back, blinked hard, and mouthed two words. Calm down. The Earl was stunned for a moment before he realized what was going on. Indeed, since the demon could speak, there was a possibility of communication. If they could communicate, it would mean a deal and negotiation. The situation was not clear yet, so there was no need to make the first move. He had indeed been influenced by the people of Grey Castle, and treated the demon as an irreconcilable enemy. Thinking about it carefully, whether it was a demon or not, the fact that it came alone might mean something, just like a human ambassador. Otherwise, why didn't it make a move? Why did it choose a place where it could see the city wall? If the demon was really as cruel and violent as Grey Castle said, it should have started a massacre a long time ago. The surrounding villages and towns were not protected by the ice abyss and the city wall. The more Marwain thought about it, the more he felt it was reasonable. If he killed the messenger, he would become the enemy of the so-called demon, which was exactly what the people of Grey Castle wanted. However, the Earl could not help but feel embarrassed when he asked the demon to kneel down and obey him, and now he wanted to communicate with it as an equal. Fortunately, the old scholar saw through his hesitation and took a step forward. What a rude person! Since you can speak the human language, you should have stated your identity and purpose from the beginning. Fortunately, His Excellency is merciful and is willing to give you a chance to start over. Why are you here? Well done. Marwain praised in his heart. As expected of a steward poached from the king's city, the 10 golden dragons were not paid in vain. Before that, I want to ask you one thing. The demon's voice returned to normal. What is your relationship with the humans of the Fertile Plains? Fertile Plains? Where is that? The group of people looked at each other, their faces full of confusion. However, Marwain knew that this monster was indeed an emissary. I don't know where you mean by the Fertile Plains, the old scholar said again. It's like the same piece of land. The north is called the south, and the south is called the north. Even a kingdom is like this, let alone our two races. I can only give you an accurate answer if you bring me the map. No, that's the name you humans gave me. I'm just using it. The other party shook his head slightly. So that's how it is. You're still the same as you were hundreds of years ago, divided like a plate of loose sand. That's why your reaction is so slow. To think that I was looking forward to seeing all of you at a loss and panicking, shouting that it was impossible, but at the same time, you were powerless against the arrival of fate. What did that mean? The Count could not help but frown. For a moment, he seemed to capture a trace of disappointment from the strange face of the other party. Don't tell me. You mean the people of Grey Castle? The chief knight suddenly asked. The demon looked at him. They've always said that when the bloody moon comes, the demons will appear from hell. Now they've indeed fled in fear and disappeared a long time ago. The knight said disdainfully. Of course, if you're fast enough, you might be able to meet them at the harbor in the east. Is that so? It looked to the east, then shifted its gaze back. I'll go there, but not now. Since you know nothing about the Fertile Plains, I'll make it short. I'm the Sky Lord, the commander of the Western Front Army. Thousands of years ago, our two races signed a protection contract to fight against the witches and their squires together. You serve my race as your master and fight under my command. In return, you'll be in charge of the power and wealth of the human territory. This contract has no expiration date, and will not end until the end of the world. As the inheritors of the human race, you should continue to serve my race. The demon's voice became loud again, as if the whole city could hear it. Now, I demand that you offer up this city according to the contract and immediately serve me. This guy is crazy. Earl Marwain was dumbfounded. What a 1,000-year agreement. How can you go back on a 1-year or 2-year contract? Who cares about things that happened thousands of years ago? And you're the commander of the Western Front Army? Which lord didn't send an emissary to negotiate with him first? There should be a limit to your nonsense. What if I don't agree? The demon's words were so rude that he could not stand it anymore. Death will make you submit. The demon who called himself the Sky Lord raised its head. See, that's fate. The Earl looked up and saw that the mountains in the distance were covered in a thin layer of fog. It was not uncommon to see fog in the impassable mountain range, but this fog was as red as blood, frighteningly red. He did not know whether it was an illusion caused by the reflection of the crimson moon, or the fog itself. Another strange thing was that the red fog did not float in the air after crossing the cliffs. Instead, it slowly flowed down from the mountains and formed a hazy waterfall. Could it be that it hadn't made a move all this while just to wait for this opportunity? Marwain felt a little uneasy. Looking at his nervous subordinates, he knew that if he did not act now, they would lose confidence. Just you. The Earl clenched his teeth and waved his hand. I've already given you a chance. Shoot. The knight and the guards were stunned for a few seconds before they suddenly came to their senses. They all pulled the trigger and crowbar. More than 10 crossbow bolts of different sizes rose into the air with a buzzing sound and shot straight at the demon. But all the arrows missed their target. The crowd could not believe what they saw. They saw the demon pass through a black hole and disappear into the stone pillar. Damn it, that's the effect of magic power, the chief knight said in a low voice. They're no different from witches. Don't be afraid. We're all wearing God's stones of retaliation. Magic power can't hurt us. Marwain clenched the pendant on his chest. Find it and kill it. The demon is there, a guard shouted. In a flash, it had crossed the barrier formed by the ice abyss and the city wall, and quietly appeared in the long street behind the wall. The Earl was alarmed that it could cross the natural barrier in one step. Such a dangerous monster, whether it was an emissary or not, must die here. After all, it was only one person. Prepare the god's stone arrows and deal with it as a witch. The person who kills it will be rewarded with 100 golden dragon stones. Just as the knight and the guards rushed toward it from all directions, the demon slowly raised its arms. The next moment, a black curtain, of dozens of feet wide appeared behind it, cutting off the street and the houses on both sides. At first glance, it looked as if the street suddenly had a thick wall. What was it trying to do? The Earl could not help but feel puzzled. It did not look like an attack or a defense. Was it trying to use this ability to hide itself? But he soon got the answer. Thick red mist spewed out from the black curtain like a breached river bank. Then a group of monsters that he had never seen before roared and rushed out of the black curtain, colliding with the knight. The god's stone did not affect the knight at all, but he was sent flying far away with blood spewing out of his mouth. A large part of his chest caved in, and it seemed that he would not survive. But this was far from the end. It was the beginning of a nightmare. Monsters kept appearing from the black curtain, as if they would never stop. They first bowed to the Sky Lord and then joined the battle. Be it in size or strength, these monsters were far superior to ordinary people. Soon, they rushed to the top of the city wall, with overwhelming strength. The chaotic battle turned into a massacre. The guards who had lost their will were torn to pieces by the monsters. Blood and broken limbs were scattered everywhere. In less than a quarter of an hour, the city was filled with cries of pain and cries for help. Those who were still alive fled out of the city in a panic, but they could not cross the bottomless ice abyss. Marwain felt his legs go weak. He swayed and fell to the ground, but this time, no one came to help him. His personal guard had been torn in half by the enemies in front of him. The snow reflection castle that he was so proud of, the territory he inherited from his grandfather's grandfather, had fallen in just a single encounter. The red mist filled with the smell of blood was overwhelming, turning the place into a living hell. Through the mist, the crimson moon in the sky appeared even more ferocious and terrifying. So this is the scene of doomsday, the Earl finally thought. Chapter 1223. Grey Castle, City of Neverwinter. Everyone in the police station was in a hurry. Orders and reports could be heard constantly. The appearance of the bloody moon had become the hottest topic in the city, and the whole organization was busy. As the new king's city of Grey Castle and the residence of His Majesty, The police department had to investigate and record even the slightest incident in the city, let alone a fire and an explosion at the same time. Carter Lannis had not slept for almost 2 days. After comforting his frightened wife that day, he devoted himself to his work. Protecting His Majesty's safety was always the top priority of the Chief Knight, and he would not tolerate anyone causing trouble here. Based on his past experience, if there were multiple incidents at the same time, it must be a gang crime. Therefore, he immediately invited the Neverwinter Detective Group to assist the police department in the investigation. Carter believed that as long as they investigated thoroughly, the conspirators would soon be brought to justice. However, after a large number of reports were submitted, a joint investigation team consisting of the Witch Union, the Security Bureau of the Kingdom, and the Police Department of the Administrative Office was formed. Instead of focusing on the accidents or crimes that happened in the city, the new magic movie would be the main focus of the investigation. "Sir, the witnesses are here," a knight whispered in Carter's ear. "Do you want to start the interrogation?" Carter cleared his mind, drank the strong tea in one gulp, and nodded. "Let's start. Invite the others in." Yes. Since they were not interrogating a criminal, the interrogation would be conducted in a temporarily vacated office to take the other party's emotions into consideration. Other than Carter, the members of the joint investigation team included Lady Agatha and Deputy Director Vader of the Security Bureau. The first witness brought into the room was a hotel maid, 21 years of age, an unofficial resident, and with no criminal record. She looked a little nervous and kept rubbing her hands in the chair. Carter glanced at the documents in his hand and asked in a low voice, "Miss Lingwang, right? I'm curious. The ticket price for the premiere of The Dust of World is 50 golden dragon. Where did you get such a huge sum of money?" "Sir, I definitely did not steal or rob this. The guest I took care of, Mr. Victor, has a high net worth. He paid for me. On the day I bought the ticket, many people in the administrative hall saw it. I swear I'm not lying." In fact, he had already sent people to investigate the background of these preliminary investigations. The first question was just to increase the invisible pressure on the other party, so that they would not easily speak nonsense. After all, Miss Nightingale was not here. "Victor, right? We'll check with him later. Let's talk about what you saw at the end of the magic movie." "Yes." The maid's voice trembled slightly. "At that time, I didn't quite understand what had happened. It was as if those illusions had become real." After a quarter of an hour, she stopped. "Fortunately, the pursuers were repelled by the police. Otherwise, I can't imagine what would have happened to those two." Carter frowned. He had watched the magic movie before. Although The Wolf Princess was thrilling, it wasn't as exaggerated as this. "Are you sure that the pursuers' weapons hurt the audience?" I'm not sure, but Mr. Victor's face was indeed bleeding, and the screams of the other victims didn't sound fake. "Do you remember when this accident happened? About 10 minutes before the movie ended? Or even longer?" "Sorry, I was so scared that I almost hid in Mr. Victor's arms." "Do you have any questions?" Carter looked at the other two. Agatha pondered for a moment and said, "If I understand correctly, the characters in the magic movie talk to you, right?" She picked up a photo and asked, "Is this the person?" In the photo was an actor from the Star Flower Troupe, who played the witch's guardian. "That's right, it's him. I remember very clearly that he even thanked us at that time." Carter had goosebumps when he heard this. Of course, he knew that once the magic movie was shot, the content could not be changed, and it was impossible for the actors to talk on their own. Seeing that the two were silent, Carter waved his hand at his subordinates and said, "Next." The statements of the witnesses were similar. To put it simply, it was as if everything in the magic movie had come alive. Although it was later proven to be a false alarm, it had really happened at the time. The testimonies matched each other, which meant that it was not a hallucination. Carter had been focusing on the fire and explosion a few days ago, so he did not pay much attention to the reports of the panic in the theater. Now he vaguely understood why his superiors paid more attention to this matter. The next witness is the police officer who was in charge of maintaining order in the courtyard at that time. He's the captain of Team 2. Let him in. The captain was obviously much calmer and quickly explained what had happened. I first heard cries and cries for help coming from outside. When I was about to go out to find out what was going on, I noticed that there was a crimson moon in the sky. To be honest, I was a little hesitant at that time. I didn't know whether I should stay at my post or help those people. Just then, a witch ran out from the back door of the theater and asked me to bring my men into the theater to protect the audience. Then you shot the people chasing after you in the magic movie. Although it sounds a little strange, it was indeed what happened. They may only be actors, but they posed a real threat to the audience at that time. Besides, I always thought that it was just an illusion, so I didn't hesitate. The second last witch to be questioned was the one who played the magic movie at that time, Nightfall. What else could I do? I was also desperate. Activating the sigil of recording was supposed to be the job of the one with the most magic power. Who knew that such a problem would occur? Nightfall complained as soon as she entered the theater. It was fine at that time, but the sigil suddenly pushed me out of the screen. According to the emergency situation, I should have immediately stopped the input of magic power, but it didn't stop at all. I wanted to shake the audience to wake them up, but they didn't respond at all. It was as if they were under a sleeping spell. Anyway, I tried my best. After thinking about it, I could only ask the guards for help. The corner of Agatha's mouth twitched. Was it the sigil that pushed you out? Probably. At that time, I did feel a repulsive force coming from it, as if I had injected enough magic power into it, and it was overflowing. After that, my vision went back to normal. Okay, next. When the last person entered the office, Carter was a little surprised to find that it was Cajun Fells, the author of the play. As soon as he sat down, he clenched his fists in excitement. Oh my God, this is definitely the most wonderful play I've ever seen in my life. Were you in the theater at that time? Carter asked with a frown. Carter had always disliked Cajun Fells because he had a dispute with his wife. I checked the list of the first audience, but you weren't on it. He was backstage and had a special seat. In fact, the members of the Starflower troupe don't need to buy tickets to watch their own magic movie. Didn't your wife tell you that? The Ice Witch replied on behalf of Cajun. In fact, it was his report that made His Majesty pay attention to this matter and send the Witch Union to investigate. Sorry, it's just my habit, Cajun said apologetically with his hand on his chest. As long as it's a play I write, I like to watch it with everyone without telling them who I am, so that I can feel the audience's reaction. Ms. May might have known about this, so she didn't tell you in advance. Cajun's tone became excited again. I have to say, this magic movie is definitely a miracle in the history of theater, because the audience rewrote its ending. What did you say? Carter asked in surprise. You heard me right, Your Excellency Knight. That's not what I wrote, Cajun Fells said, waving his hands. In the original story, this was a sad ending. In order to protect his sweetheart, the guardian attracted the attention of all the pursuers and fell off the cliff, leaving the witch alone. But I didn't expect that the two of them would be saved by the audience, and both of them survived. Is there anything better than this? The chief knight was stunned. Chapter 1224. Roland had experienced the most stressful week since he took charge of Neverwinter. Although all the signs indicated that the arrival of the Bloody Moon might be much earlier than in the past, and he had been working hard in this regard, the sudden change still exceeded everyone's expectations. It was not the church's estimate of 10 years, nor the tequila's estimate of 2 or 3 years, but the sudden appearance of the Bloody Moon in the sky above the western region not long after he started the population migration plan. Of course, this was not accurate. During the past week, urgent reports from other cities had been delivered one after another, all of which mentioned the changes in the sky. Without exception, no one had noticed the approaching and moving process of the Bloody Moon. It was as if it had always been hanging there, but it was covered by the sky and in a state of invisibility. Now it was just the blue sky that was covering it. Roland found himself suffering from a mild crimson moon syndrome. No matter what he was doing, he would intentionally or unintentionally look for a window through which he could see the sky, and it was very easy for him to fall into a daze while looking at the Bloody Moon from afar. The red halo was so huge but not dazzling. Whether it was day or night, he could clearly see its outline. If he stared at it for a long time, he would even have the illusion that the bloody moon was also staring at him. According to the Union, the appearance of the bloody moon meant the beginning of the battle of divine will. These years, Roland had been preparing for it, but when it really came, he had a feeling that it was not real. The fertile plains was still quiet, and there was no response from the scouting team sent to the north. Only Neverwinter was greatly affected. The administrative office sent a report every half an hour, but it had nothing to do with demons. Your Majesty, Nightingale's voice interrupted his thoughts. You're staring at the sky in a daze again. Roland blinked and came to his senses. Sorry, I just couldn't help. Nightingale flashed over and put a piece of dried fish in front of his mouth, interrupting him. You don't have to apologize. In fact, there's nothing wrong with being in a daze. You've been too tired these days. Just take it as a rest. Do you want me to accompany you to watch the moon? Since the bloody moon is related to the divine will, it's also a kind of research to look at it. Roland was immediately amused. Nightingale was probably the only one who could talk about slacking in such a dignified manner. He took the fillet with his mouth and shook his head helplessly. There are still many things to do. Continue to supervise me. Don't go easy on me, got it? Nightingale pursed her lips and went back to lie on the sofa. Roland took a deep breath and turned his attention back to the stack of reports on the table. These days, the bloody moon had caused more trouble for Neverwinter than the demons from thousands of miles away. According to the statistics of the Administrative Office and the Security Bureau, there were 4 fires and 16 crimes in Neverwinter in the past week. In addition to the 8 industrial accidents from Anna, a total of 21 people were killed, and more than 500 people were injured. 90% of the casualties occurred within 24 hours after the appearance of the bloody moon, which could be said to be the most chaotic moment since the establishment of the city. At first, Roland thought that all this was caused by the panic of the people. However, when he gradually gathered the facts on the scene, he found that it was not that simple. Therefore, he appointed a joint team to carry out a further investigation. And the conclusion was quite surprising. Apart from the accidents caused by the panic, the magic fluctuations caused by the appearance of the bloody moon was the real culprit of the chaos. The investigation documents submitted by Agatha clearly described the situation at that time. At about 5:35 p.m., the bloody moon suddenly appeared in the sky, and the magic equipment that was working in Neverwinter was affected to varying degrees. For example, the ending of the drama, The Dust of Oblivion, which was playing in the theater, suddenly changed, and the illusion was almost the same as the real scene. The lighting in the industrial area was overloaded, and all the light bulbs were fused, and some of the machine tools driven by Donai were paralyzed. The most serious accident occurred in the No. 1 machinery plant, where an old boiler exploded on the spot, and the hot high-pressure steam pushed all the surrounding workers to the ground. Afterward, the investigation proved that, due to the limitations of the manufacturing process of the boiler, the valve and other important parts had been solidified by candle, and the furnace body already had hidden problems before that, but no one had noticed. According to the evidence collected from various parties, this abnormal state lasted for about 10 minutes, and then gradually stabilized. The frequent accidents further aggravated the chaos at that time, and even made many people think that the demons were attacking Neverwinter. Although the factory had practiced the accident emergency plan, the implementation was not ideal. If the public medical system of Neverwinter had not been far superior to the modern level, and if Nana had not been in charge of the treatment, the death toll would have been several times higher. Logically speaking, such a strange phenomenon should have been recorded by the Union, but the fact was that the tequila witches also did not know about it. Now that Roland thought about it, either the fluctuation of the bloody moon in the past 2 times was relatively small, or the popularity of the magic power equipment at that time was not high, so no one noticed the small change. The impact of the accident had not completely disappeared. As no one dared to say that the fluctuation of the bloody moon would not appear again, the factory carried out a comprehensive inspection operation, improving or eliminating all kinds of old machines. The administrative office also supplemented the emergency plan, including how to stay awake in abnormal situations and avoid panic, and so on. For the first time, the term magic power accident was officially recorded in the official document. On the contrary, the second screening of the Magic movie 3 days after it had been off the air triggered a new wave of interest in Neverwinter. People who knew the plot of the premiere almost crowded the drama theater, and most of them came for the gimmick of personally participating in and changing history. Even though the Magic movie had returned to normal, the audience's enthusiasm did not diminish. It could be said that this was one of the few interesting things that had happened in the past week. In any case, this chain of accidents cast a shadow on the Magic Cube Power Unit, which was about to be launched. What Roland most wanted to know now was whether the fluctuation of the Bloody Moon would only appear at the moment when the Bloody Moon appeared, or whether it would appear at irregular intervals throughout the Battle of Divine Will. If it was the former, he could accept the possibility that it would only appear once every 400 years. After all, defeating the demons was his top priority. Whether it was Dawn Eye or the Magic Cube Power Unit, they both had advantages that conventional equipment could not compare with. They could greatly improve the industrial capacity of Grey Castle, and once used, they would become addictive. However, if it was the latter, he had to consider the high risk of losing control. Just then, the phone in the administrative office rang. Generally speaking, the only person who could enter this interior line was Chief Barov. Roland sighed, picked up the receiver, and put it to his ear. Is there a new problem? Chapter 1225. Roland had a deep impression of the chief astrologer, who not only scrupulously abided by etiquette, but also paid great attention to his duties. Although he did not make many achievements in stargazing, the Arithmetic Academy did a good job. He not only trained a large number of talents for Neverwinter, but also participated in the overall planning of various departments in the administrative office. It could be said that under his leadership, the Astrology Association had gradually reversed its previous predicament of being a scholar without any influence. Now the Astrology Association was almost as influential as the Alchemist Association. On the day when the Bloody Moon first appeared, Dispersion Star had repeatedly come to Roland's door to apologize for failing to send a warning in advance. However, Roland had been busy dealing with the emergency in Neverwinter at that time, so he had asked his guards to send Dispersion Star back. After all, no one had expected that the Bloody Moon would appear so suddenly. Moreover, Roland had never expected the Astrology Association to discover the Bloody Moon in the first place. He had only persuaded them because they could write and calculate. Roland guessed that the discovery of the Bloody Moon must be extraordinary if such a well-behaved person used the word must. After hanging up the phone, Roland immediately took his guards and rushed to the Arithmetic Academy in the south of the city. The so-called observatory was just an attic in the Arithmetic Academy. Before the astrologers moved to the top floor of the Miracle Building, it had temporarily become their temporary place to observe the stars. Of course, due to the construction time of the spectacle exceeding expectations, in order to avoid the huge disparity between the initial expectations and the actual treatment, which would lead to a psychological gap, he also specially made a few large aperture astronomical telescopes for these people and transformed the top floor of the attic into a professional stargazing venue that could rotate freely. Astrologer of Dispersion Star had been waiting for Roland with a group of astrologers for a long time. When they saw Roland, they all knelt on one knee and said, "Your Majesty, get up." Roland waved his hand casually, indicating that he had important business to attend to. "Let's cut to the chase. What did you find? Your Majesty, please follow me." The old astrologer solemnly led Roland to the top floor of the attic. Pushing the door open, Roland saw that the floor of the room was covered with calculation drafts and hand-drawn lines. Based on his shallow knowledge of astronomy, it should be the calculation of the trajectory of some stars. In fact, his knowledge of astronomy was only enough to scare them at first. After he taught them elementary physics and mathematics, after 2 years of learning, these people's practical application level was already above his. Except for Astrologer of Dispersion Star, the other astrologers did not follow him in. Instead, they stood outside the door. The moment the door was closed, Roland caught a very serious look on the faces of the white-haired people, as if what they were about to say was no different from their last words. Roland. Nightingale couldn't help but secretly tug at his sleeve. Roland nodded calmly. With Nightingale protecting him, he was not worried about any danger. However, he was curious about what kind of discovery could make these astrologers behave so cautiously. Your Majesty, these days, we have been observing the trajectory of the bloody moon, and the changes it brings. After a moment of silence, Dispersion Star finally said, since we failed to accurately predict its arrival, we at least hope to make some compensation, such as determining its location and size. Otherwise, the mission given to the Astrology Association at the beginning will be meaningless. However, the results we have obtained these days are extremely frightening. Extremely frightening? Roland frowned. This was not a word that could be associated with discovery. What do you mean? Get to the point. Yes, Your Majesty. The astrologer lowered his voice and said, I'm afraid that the star of extinction is a hoax. The bloody moon doesn't exist. Roland was stunned, and then subconsciously turned his head to look out of the window. The scarlet sphere was still hanging high in the air, showing no signs of dissipating. You mean that thing doesn't exist? I also thought it was funny when I first thought of this conclusion. However, as the observation continued, no one in the Astrology Association could laugh anymore. Dispersion Star heaved a sigh of relief. Once he started, he seemed to be relieved of a burden and spoke more fluently. Yes, Your Majesty. It doesn't exist. According to the observation data accumulated in the past 100 years and the knowledge you taught us, we can conclude that such a huge celestial body can't possibly not affect other stars. However, according to the redrawn star chart, we've tracked and calculated the starlight in the original location of the star of extinction, and found that none of the stars deviated because of its departure. This means that the star of extinction didn't affect other stars or us. Not only that, it didn't even affect itself. Before this, the star of extinction didn't show any signs of movement, which usually means that it's rotating at the same time as us. But now, it's still at the same time even though it's getting closer to us. It doesn't make sense that the star of extinction doesn't show any change in speed. Roland quickly understood what the old scholar meant. If we remove it from the sky, then everything makes sense. Dispersion Star nodded. Everything will be normal when it doesn't exist. In other words, it doesn't make any difference to the world whether the bloody moon is there or not. Roland fell into silence upon hearing this. He roughly understood why the chief astrologer was so hesitant and cautious. The rumors about the bloody moon and the Battle of Divine Will came from the ancient Tequila witches. As the dean of the Arithmetic Academy, Dispersion Star had more or less heard some inside information about them when he contacted the central carrier. If these were all proven to be lies made up by the Union, it would cause irreparable damage to the relationship between the two parties. However, Roland did not think about this at all. Other lords might feel uncomfortable when they heard this, but for him, watching Celine study the Rubik's Cube and taking the gods' punishment witches to stroll on the pedestrian street were all fun things to do. Even if the basis of cooperation was greatly reduced, he did not mind maintaining this relationship. Moreover, the threat of the demons was real. Are you sure that your judgment is correct? Your Majesty, I've been thinking about this for a long time. It wasn't until I received a letter from a friend in the Old King's City this morning that I dared to come to a conclusion. Astrologer Dispersion Star took out a piece of paper from his pocket and unfolded it. It seemed to be a map of the bloody moon. Because of the different observation points, the positions of the stars will be slightly deviated. My old friend used to be a nobleman, but he's very interested in astronomy. Therefore, I asked him to check the star area of the bloody moon from another direction. It turned out that the answer he sent back was very different from the position we observed. It's almost inexplicable as an error. That is to say, if the bloody moon is used as a reference point, it means that it's fixed in one place no matter from which angle we look at it. It's not only stationary relative to the Earth we're on, but also relative to everyone. Hearing this, Roland's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Your Majesty, everything in the world has a front, a back, a left, a right, a height, and a thickness. Something that doesn't change from any angle can't be an entity. Dispersion Star said word by word. Suddenly, Roland thought of the red spot he saw in the dream world. Although its shape was very irregular, no matter how he looked at it, it always looked the same. In the dream world, it had another name. Chapter 12:26. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Your Majesty? Dispersion Star's voice pulled Roland back from his stupor. Roland rubbed his aching forehead. Are these things only known to the astrologers? All the observations are done by people with star names. The apprentices and the disciples of the Arithmetic Academy don't know about it. The old scholar knelt down again. I see, Roland thought. No wonder the astrologers outside looked like they were going to say their last words when I entered the door. If they could connect the dots, they could also imagine the possibility that the Lord would kill all the people who accidentally knew the truth to maintain the status quo. After all, in the past, the real purpose of the Astrology Association and the rumor of the Star of Extinction were secrets that only the successors of the royal family were qualified to know. As expected of a group of people who had lived in the capital for a long time and were extremely familiar with palace politics, Roland did not know whether he should blame them for being overly paranoid or praise them for their loyalty even though they knew the possible consequences. He shook his head helplessly. You've done a good job. Don't reveal this conclusion for the time being. Continue with your work. I'm not talking about astrology, but about the Arithmetic Academy. It's more important to solve the current problems in Neverwinter than to study something that doesn't exist. After saying this, he turned around and walked out of the attic, leaving the old scholar standing there in a daze. Go back to the castle, Roland ordered in a low voice. Compared with his eagerness when he left, he walked back even faster, almost trotting. Do you think what the astrologers said is true? Nightingale, who had been following him, could not help but show herself and ask. I don't know. It's just a sudden thought, Roland said in a low voice. It's not the bloody moon, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Maybe it's something else. Something else. For example, a hole. Because of his preconceived notions, he had never thought deeply about the bloody moon. Its huge size was only because it was close to the moon. For example, when he looked at Jupiter from Io, the latter almost occupied 2/3 of the sky. Now that he thought about it, the ancients called it the moon just because it was round and not dazzling. If it was really erosion, it could be square or polygonal. Nightingale's tone was filled with confusion. Are you saying that our sky has cracked? It could be worse than that, but I have to confirm it first. How do I confirm it? Roland glanced at her. In your dreams. Although it was still early, it did not prevent him from entering the dream world. This time, he did not inform any of the gods' punishment witches, only leaving Nightingale by his side. The day of the Divine Will's appearance is the appointed time to meet. Roland had been trying to figure out what the will of the divine referred to. It was only at this moment that he realized that the will of the divine was not referring to the events in the dream world, but the time in the real world. If that was the case, it meant that the person who left the note not only knew the essence of the dream world, but also knew that there was a real world outside of it, and could accurately perceive its changes. It sounded incredible, but the moment astrologer of Dispersion Star said that the bloody moon did not exist, all the confusion and suspicion that had been lingering in his mind were instantly penetrated by a bolt of lightning. Whether it was the battle of divine will he heard in the Prism City or the unnamed Book of Dreams, they were probably all leading him in this direction. Uncle, what do you want for breakfast? Zero stood in front of the sink and asked vaguely with a toothbrush in her mouth when he pushed open the bedroom door. I'm not eating. Just prepare your own food, Roland shouted without turning his head. He casually put on a coat from the sofa and went out on 2 slippers without even putting on his shoes. At this time, the streets were crowded with people. Youtiao stalls and bun stalls were crowded with students and office workers. The sizzling sounds of frying and shouting interweaved with each other, forming a short but noisy bustle in the tube area. The only exception was the Rose Café. From the signboard to the storefront, it looked out of place with the surrounding stalls, like a gorgeously dressed non-mainstream shop. When Roland took out the key to open the door, He saw the stall owner looking at him as if he was an idiot. He took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and went straight to private room 302. As for why there was only one private room in the whole cafe, and the private room on the first floor was called 302, he deliberately ignored it as an insignificant detail. Due to the endless emergencies in Neverwinter this week, Roland had no time to care about the dream world. Now that he put his hand on the doorknob, he felt a little nervous, which was rare for him. As for how the other party could enter the shop before the door was opened, it was not within his consideration at all. The person who could reflect words in a champagne glass must have incredible power. Not to mention sneaking in quietly. Even if he suddenly appeared in front of him, he would not be surprised. Roland took a deep breath and turned the doorknob. The compartment was empty. Except for a low table and 4 chairs, there was nothing else in the small tofu block. The moment he opened the door, he could see every corner. There was no place to hide. He could not help but feel a little disappointed. He slowly walked to the table and sat down. Did I guess wrong? Yes, people are not ghosts. How can they teleport here? I should wait a little longer. But more doubts followed. Did the person who wrote the note really know that this cafe, which opened less than a month ago, would come to find me? What if the other party also waited at the agreed place? Or maybe the note was just a prank, thinking that the arrival of the divine will in the real world had nothing to do with the dream world. In the end, he did not have any substantial evidence. As expected, it was not so easy to know the answer. Just as Roland got up and was about to leave the private room, a sweet sound of wind chimes rang. Ding ding dang dang. Welcome, light. He subconsciously stopped mid-sentence. The god's punishment witches did not enter the dream world with him, and Garcia would not come to his cafe for no reason. There should not be anyone who was willing to drink the expensive coffee now. When Roland came back to his senses, he opened the door and looked into the shop, only to see a slightly familiar figure at the door. He had seen the person twice. Once at the newcomer reception in the Prism City. Once at the Reflection Church in the old holy city of Hermes. Roland had only seen her twice, but she had left a deep impression on him. I didn't expect you to open your own rose cafe, not to mention in a corner like this. I almost thought you didn't even find the note. Chapter 1227. Roland was surprised to see Lon, but he also felt that it was only natural. Who are you? A trapped person looking for help. Lon said as she looked around. Lon looked around. I know you have a lot to ask me. We can sit down and talk. Let's choose this seat by the window. You don't need to go to room 302? He watched as the man chose a seat close to the street and sat down. We agreed on a place to avoid being noticed. Since there's no one else here, we can sit anywhere, Lon said casually. By the way, since we're in a cafe, can you get me an iced dessert? I thought that the secret discussion would be about a shocking secret that would make one's nerves tense, and that the slightest leak would bring about a great disaster. The value of a secret depends on the person who hears it. Besides staying underground all day and keeping an eye on the erosion, I'm nervous enough. It's not easy to come out, so I want to relax, Lon said slowly. A cup of iced dessert, thank you. Roland stared at her for a while and said grumpily, I only have instant ones. That's okay. Damn it. She's in my territory, but she seems to be the host. Roland thought. He poured the coffee and milk from the fridge into a cup, added 2 ice cubes, and brought it to Lon. His eyes never left Lon during the whole process. Don't worry, I won't disappear. Lon shrugged. That's hard to say, Roland said without blinking. I've asked Garcia to contact you, and I've been to the Prism City twice, but at that time, you seem to have disappeared. Since you left a note, why didn't you talk to me directly? This time, Lon was silent for a long time and then sighed. Because it wasn't the right time, child. It wasn't the right time? Roland paused and said, You mean it's more believable for me to find out that the bloody moon is actually the erosion than for you to tell me? Your reaction is very fast, which makes me look forward to you a little more. Looking forward to helping you. Roland could not help but snort. You don't look like someone who needs help at all. Then what kind of performance do you think will make you believe me? Impatiently begging? Hug your thighs and cry? Or promise a bunch of generous rewards? Lon shook her head. No, even if I did that, you wouldn't believe me easily. That would only make things worse. If you don't do it, how will you know the result? Roland wanted to reply half-jokingly, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. She was not a peer like Garcia. She was the chief disciple of the Martialist Association, Garcia's master, and Roland's senior. If she counted the sigil of recording she saw in the Reflection Church, then she was probably 700 or 800 years old. Looking at this character who seemed to have walked out of history, he found that he could not help but restrain himself. All right. Roland sat down opposite Lon and tried to sort out all the questions in his head. Were you a member of the Union? He asked. I have nothing to do with your world, Lon replied. I was born here, so I will sleep here, even though it will be an extremely long process. But I've seen your portrait in the Reflection Church. It's not strange to have similar appearances, she interrupted. Not to mention that it's recorded in history, so it doesn't have much value as a reference. That's too much of a coincidence. Roland frowned. If you look at the timeline long enough, you'll find that any coincidence is nothing more than that. Instead of worrying about the past, it's better to focus on the present. Lon might not know anything, or she might be deliberately hiding it. However, Roland knew that without Nightingale's help, he would not be able to tell the truth from a few sentences. Since Lon had answered in this way, there was no point in dwelling on it. It was better to ask other questions. So, what is magic power? Lon raised the corner of her mouth. You should have guessed it, it's nothing. All existing systems can't explain it because it doesn't belong to this world, just like low-dimensional creatures can't understand high-dimensional structures. The only thing we know is that we can use it, so you can also use a common term to describe it. The power obtained by chance. Sure enough, it's the same as the force of nature. Roland thought to himself, no, that's not right. It's not that magic power is the same as the force of nature, but that they're the same thing. The dream world had become what it was in order to explain what magic power was from another perspective. So the explanation you gave at the freshman welcoming party in the Prism City, and the speculation in the book Raison d'Etre, are they all true? One was the origin and nature of the erosion, and the other was the inference about the battle of divine will. These were the two questions he wanted to find out the most. Not exactly, but you can think of it that way, Lon answered in a surprisingly straightforward manner. I want to know the exact way. That's beyond your ability to understand, and you can't express it in your language system. Lon took a sip of coffee. Besides, all my actions are monitored by God. Once I reveal any information that might endanger God, both worlds will be destroyed. Therefore, please remember one thing. Only what you personally comprehend is the true answer. Roland could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Isn't this equivalent to saying that even if I lie, it's for your own good? It has the ability to destroy the world. That's why I used God to refer to it. After all, it's the most likely image in your mind to have this ability. What's God's purpose? To continue the battle of divine will. Then what's your relationship with God? This time, Lon did not answer immediately. Instead, she hesitated and said, I'm the one who betrayed God. Betrayed? Yes, this kind of reincarnation will never end. I don't want to be trapped in this place forever. Also, reincarnation means loss. One day, God will also collapse. When that time comes, no matter which world it is, it will become dead silent. Roland looked at her for a while. So your purpose is? I need your help, child. Lon did not avoid his eyes. I need you to stop the battle of divine will and stop it completely. You mean win the war? No, that's just starting a new reincarnation. Lon shook her head. If you want to stop all this, you must replace God. Roland could not help but be stunned. This answer was really sensational. He took a breath and said, Sorry, please forgive me for refusing. Why? Lon was puzzled. Her expression also changed a little from before. I can't verify what you've told me. Moreover, even you admitted that in order to avoid God's surveillance, You can only use ambiguous answers. Sometimes it only takes one word to mislead. This means that I may have been deceived by you and am counting money for you. After all, you said you betrayed God. Isn't it easier to betray me? Roland spread out his hands. I'm not good at pulling chestnuts out of the fire. So you'd better find someone else to replace God. If you can do this, stop. Roland stretched out his hand. Didn't you say you wouldn't promise a lot of rewards? You just said that this would only make things worse. This time, Lon stared at him for a full 10 minutes. No. I changed my mind. That's not very useful. Roland got up and poured himself a cup of coffee. Empty rewards are like hanging a carrot in front of a donkey. It looks good, but it's meaningless if you can't eat it. You should at least hear me out. I said, you can let ashes return to the world. Bang bang. Chapter 12:28. How do you know this name? Lon said calmly. Although I was born here, it doesn't mean I know nothing about your world. Have you ever heard of the realm of mind? Or the origin of magic? Roland immediately remembered what Caberdabi had told him. He rushed to the table and asked Lon in a deep voice, is she in the realm of mind? Of course not. The realm of mind remembers her. Anyone who has enough power will leave a mark in the realm of mind. Lon paused. I know what you're thinking. You want to know the specific method and then try to solve the problem by yourself. You also want to end the battle of divine will. But I have to tell you, time is running out. What do you mean? The realm of mind is not a suitable vessel for long-term stay. The longer you wait, the weaker her consciousness will become, until she completely disappears. This process is irreversible, so even if you know the method, you may not be able to realize it. And this is not the worst-case scenario. What's the worst-case scenario? The existence of the dream world has seriously interfered with God's will. God will not allow this to continue. In other words, when God believes that no measures can be taken to bring the status quo back to the right track, both worlds will be destroyed. I'm afraid this deadline is far more urgent than you think, which is why I made up my mind to persuade you. Lon said word by word. Child, helping me is also helping yourself. It sounds like it, Roland said noncommittally. But you just said that only what I understand is the real answer. That is to say, what you told me may be a lie, including the resurrection of ashes. Lon heaved a sigh of relief and leaned back in the chair. You can understand it this way, because I don't want you to think that I'm deceiving you until the end. It's also a proof of my sincerity. Roland fell silent. There was no doubt that this was a dilemma. From the information he already knew, he could not find many loopholes in her words. For example, he had heard about the threat of the dream world more than once from the magic creatures. Although he did not know how he had provoked them, the hostility shown by those monsters was real. Combining this with Lan's information, it meant that the magical creatures were the subordinates of God. However, it would be too rash of him to believe that everything she said was the truth. After all, Lon had the final say on what kind of information would harm the gods. If he made a deduction based on the wrong clues, the conclusion he came to would undoubtedly be even more wrong. The safest way was to prove it bit by bit. The problem was time. Without being able to determine that there was not much time left, choosing to play it safe was also a risk. As long as he closed his eyes, the image of Tilly crying in his arms would reappear in his mind. Even though she had restrained all the sorrow in her heart, compared to the original appearance, her eyes still lacked some spirit, like jewelry covered in a light layer of dust. Some people often say that this is the proof of maturity. Only by experiencing loss can one know how to cherish. Roland scoffed at this kind of chicken soup for the soul. Never losing was the choice of a mature person. As for pain, anyone could experience it if they wanted. Now that there was such a possibility, he could not remain indifferent no matter what. Roland tried his best to suppress the turbulent emotions in his heart. He pretended to be reluctant, and sat down in front of Lon again. But I can't promise you so easily. Let's talk about the method. What should I do to bring her back to that world? This matter doesn't conflict with the help I need. In other words, the two are the same thing, Lon replied slowly. First, you have to find the realm of mind and enter it. This step must be carried out in both worlds at the same time. Otherwise, it's impossible to succeed. Roland was surprised. 2 worlds? Wait, you mean the origin of magic really exists? Yes, it's not something illusory. It's something that can be seen and touched. It's completely different from the emptiness caused by the erosion. Lon nodded. In fact, it's close to the north of the Land of Dawn. We call it the Bottomless Land. Roland's heart skipped a beat. This term seemed familiar. But the north has been occupied by demons. You know demons, right? They're the enemies of the battle of divine will. I can't help you with that world. Interfering with the battle of divine will is a taboo for the gods. You can only solve this problem yourself, Lon said calmly. Defeat them, carve a bloody path, and then reach the bottomless land. If you can't do this, there's no point in talking about it. That's why she said that even if I know the method, I might not be able to make it in time. Roland pondered for a moment. All right, even if you didn't say anything, I'll still drive the demons out of the Land of Dawn. Then how do I reach the realm of mind from the dream world? Since it's fake, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Before I answer you, I want to ask you a question. Lon looked out the window. Do you really think that this world is fake? Roland was startled and involuntarily followed her line of sight. The rush hour for school and work had passed, and there were fewer people on the street. The stall owners finally had time to rest. Some were counting the morning's harvest, their faces full of joy. Some lit up a cigarette and sat at the entrance to read the newspaper. Instead of students and office workers, the uncles and aunties who lived here carried their grocery baskets and shuttled through the narrow streets. When they passed by the Rose Café, they would look at it with disdain or whisper to their companions, as if they were mocking the taste of the shop owner. Roland knew that if he went out and argued with them, he would not get the lines that he had long prepared. Instead, he would get a bunch of curses that reflected the subtlety of language, and the kind that would be retorted 10 times. The other stall owners would not show an indifferent expression. Most of them would form a row and happily watch the battle for the king, or the rookies pecking at each other. Faced with such a world, he suddenly realized that he could not simply say the word yes. How can a person distinguish between reality and fiction? Lon asked in a low voice, somewhat absent-minded. Is it true that a person has to have a body to be considered as a real life? If a thought has emotions and self-consciousness, just because it's not fixed or exists in the form of energy, does it not count as a real life? I think it should be. Lon withdrew her gaze. Then you have to protect this place. Once it's destroyed, the trillions of lives in this world will disappear, and the loss will be even greater than that of the outside world. If you lose it, the realm of mind will be closed to you forever. Is the entrance to the realm of mind in this city. To be precise, this is the realm of mind, Lon corrected. You're now in the realm of mind. Roland's eyes widened in surprise. Chapter 1229. Is this also the power of magic power? That's right. I can't explain all the manifestations of magic power in my lifetime. In words that you can understand, it's above the 4 great forces, and it's also the final solution to the grand unification. Lon explained in a calm voice, which sounded incredible. But even so, it doesn't mean that you can enter the realm of God and interfere with the battle of divine will. After all, this world is relatively independent, as if it's separated by a thick membrane. It's because of this that I have the opportunity to sit here and meet you. The scene of blowing bubbles appeared in Roland's mind. One of the slowly rising bubbles seemed to be the dream world. Then how can I pass through the barrier? It's the same way magic power enters our world. Lon paused for a moment. Erosion. Can you be more specific? You should have noticed that this world is very different from when it was first born. Lan's words made Roland's heart beat faster. At first, it was only a reflection of your consciousness, but now there are many things that even you haven't seen before. All these changes started when you recovered the force of nature. You know that. Roland was slightly surprised. Because I've been wandering in the realm of mind since I was born, so I'm very sensitive to these changes. Listen up, child. Whether it's the dream world or the god's domain, they're both maintained by magic power, which is reflected in the force of nature. By continuously recovering them, this world will continue to expand until it overlaps with the realm of God, and the erosion cracks will appear. This theory was not much different from the explanation given at the newcomers' welcome meeting. As far as I know, the Martialist Association has collected a large number of fallen force of nature cores. If you want to recover them as soon as possible, isn't it the best choice to stand on the side of the fallen? Lon did not object, but smiled bitterly. Unfortunately, I'm only a disciple of the Defender, so I can't take you into the central shelter of the Prism City. Even if you become enemies with the association, it won't matter. If you can stop the battle of divine will, the dream world will naturally not be threatened by the erosion. In a sense, this is in line with the purpose of the association. It's just that that child might feel extremely sad. After all, she's filled with expectations for you. At this point, a rare expression appeared on Hayes's face, as if there was helplessness mixed with some loneliness. Did she mean Garcia? Roland could not help but feel a little surprised. Since the other party was a person who served the gods, his existence could probably be counted in millions of years. Such a person should have already seen through everything, so why would he have such strong feelings for an ordinary disciple? Was it because he was used to acting, or was he unknowingly influenced by this identity? I didn't say I had to do that. Roland wanted to use the coffee to ease the tense atmosphere, but then he remembered that the cup had been smashed into pieces. He could only retract his outstretched hand. Besides, you said that the realm of mind has to be in both worlds at the same time to be effective, right? Perhaps by that time, they would have already collected enough cores. The only problem was, how could I tell that the dream world had already overlapped with the divine domain? The erosion in the Prism City can't be the entrance, right? Of course, the empty space caused by the erosion is the void zone of the realm of mind. It has a completely different rule from here, so it can't be used as a passage. Lon nodded. As for the degree to which the world of God can be eroded, you'll feel it when the time comes. However, this will also activate the countdown to the destruction of all things. You have to open the passage to the bottomless land before that happens. And then, Hayes shook her head. It seemed that the following content would be deemed as information that could endanger the gods and trigger a ban. Roland thought to himself. However, he could not rule out the possibility that the other party was deliberately hiding it. Anyway, at this point, he had a general understanding of what he had to do. In fact, be it chasing the demons out of the land of dawn or robbing the fallen evils to subsidize the ancient witch's expenses, they were already part of his original plan. It did not matter much whether he had this information or not. If he had to describe it, it would probably be changing the priority of the battle of divine will to the point that he had to grasp both sides. The part that he could not be sure of was what he would encounter in the bottomless land. This was also the part that the other party had not mentioned. If there was a trap, it was most likely to be the step of replacing the gods. He did not think that the gods would surrender to him as long as he opened the passage to the realm of mind. Moreover, the description might be covered with a layer of ambiguity, so he had to be more cautious when the time came. In addition, Roland had another question. Why did it have to be him? In the overall plan, he was not irreplaceable. Although Hayes looked like a human, Roland would never treat her as an ordinary human being. Since the Union had been defeated and the survivors had retreated to a corner of the continent, it was obvious that the demons and the Sky-Sea realm were more suitable to achieve this goal. According to Hayes, the bottomless land was close to the north of the land of dawn, and was now occupied by the demons. Caberdabi had also brought information about the aggressive Sky-Sea realm, which undoubtedly meant that the demons were not having a good time either. It was still a problem whether they could defend their current territory. In any case, the two races had a much greater advantage than the humans. The two goals were almost half achieved. Even if the bottomless land could not be entered from the outside, Roland was not arrogant enough to think that he was the only one who could leave a trace in the realm of mind. At least, Zero had such an ability. He had vaguely realized that the sole battlefield was based on the power of the realm of mind. and the dream world was developed from this. He asked, I'm afraid. I'm not the first person you asked for help, am I? Hayes answered without hesitation. Yes, there have been a few in the past 1,000 years. Sure enough, Roland's heart skipped a beat. Including the demons? I don't know what happened there. After leaving the divine realm, I lost the ability to contact other servants. I can only tell you that there's more than one traitor. Who was the last one? 0. The dream relayer, Alfina. She's been here for 869 years. Roland ran through the information in his mind and found it was a completely strange name. None of them succeeded? Hayes sighed. You may think it's easy to talk like this, but in fact, they didn't even manage to take the first step, which is to establish a stable space in the realm of mind. Otherwise, even if they could connect to the realm of mind, I would only be able to convey a few words, and it would be difficult for me to establish a stable communication. In addition, my identity and words can't exist independently of their consciousness. In other words, I have to be within their understanding in order to effectively transmit information. The higher their understanding, the more accurate the answer will be. This is an ironclad rule that cannot be breached, whether it is for you or for the demons. Just like how a summer insect can't talk about ice. Exactly. In fact, you're the first person to meet these conditions. Although I don't quite understand why you have so much more information than this era, it's a blessing for me. Then, Roland hesitated and decided to ask, what if I fail? Chapter 1230. What will the world look like after liberation? Roland asked tentatively, what benefits will you get? Will you break away from the realm of mind and become a physical being? To be honest, I don't know, Lon said with a smile. But it's better than being trapped here forever. At least, the future is full of possibilities. Roland stared at her for a while. She looked very natural, as if she had made a very normal choice. It seemed that it was impossible to find Lan's flaws through conversation. He thought to himself, unless I can bring Nightingale into the dream world. Roland's subsequent inquiries yielded little information. Whenever Lon mentioned God, she would remain silent. She could not help the battle of divine will either. Furthermore, due to the restrictions of the dream world, she could only act as a martial artist here. Secretly sending messages was already the limit. According to Lon, different areas of the realm of mind had different rules, which even God could not change. It was precisely because of this that she was able to catch her breath and secretly search for a savior who could stop the battle of divine will. But before everything was over, she would not be truly free. The shackles that bound her still existed, and could turn her efforts into nothingness at any time. When he walked Lon to the door, Roland asked one last question. By the way, you said you didn't expect me to open a cafe. Is there really a place called Rose Cafe in this city? Yes, Lon said with a smile. It's in the Prism City. But I asked Garcia about it. The cafe is located in the middle of the city. Only the senior members of the Martialist Association can enter it. At that time, I already knew that the association planned to issue you a hunting license. Once you get it, you can go to the central area. But I didn't expect you to have no interest in the association at all. You haven't been to the Prism City even after getting the license. Lon paused for a moment. By the way, the central shelter that stores the core of the fallen evils is located at the bottom of the city. Usually only the guardians and above can enter it. So that's how it is. Roland finally understood why he couldn't find the rendezvous point. It turned out that the Rose Cafe was a welfare facility for internal personnel, and only the higher-ups could use it. And the next meeting, in what cafe, if necessary? After all, there are 2 roses now. The old place is better. She looked at the towering tube-shaped building and said softly, Garcia lives in this building, right? It's not a bad idea to come here once in a while. I might like it here. Perhaps? He didn't even know if he liked it or not. Roland raised his eyebrows and did not reply. After saying goodbye, Lan's figure gradually disappeared into the alley. Roland leaned against the door of the shop, digesting the huge amount of information he had obtained from this conversation. Both the dream world and the real world seemed to have become unprecedentedly clear. Magic power, divine will, realm of mind, land of dawn, bottomless abyss. These terms were no longer simple concepts. Through the new information he obtained, they became a whole. While he was deep in thought, he suddenly felt a strange tremor pass through his body. Roland suddenly raised his head and found that there was a distorted ripple in front of him, as if a boundless transparent wall was sweeping across the entire street, and after passing him, it rapidly expanded into the distance. What's going on? He looked at the other people in the community in surprise, but those uncles and aunties did not seem to notice anything different. They were still talking and laughing as they went about their own business. If he had not had a similar experience, he would have thought that he was hallucinating. I can't be wrong. Roland clenched his fists. This was a change that only he could feel, and the fluctuation was similar to the reaction he had when he retrieved the magic creature's core. Although the former made him feel comfortable and warm, the latter made him feel a faint sense of uneasiness. Could it be that something had impacted the dream world, resulting in such a phenomenon? Unfortunately, Lon had already left, and he did not go to the Prism City to get the association's dedicated mobile phone. Otherwise, he might be able to ask her something. Roland suppressed his distracting thoughts, locked the door of the cafe, and returned to the tube-shaped apartment. He had planned to disconnect from the dream world and return to reality, but when he pushed open the door of room 0825, he saw Zero's sneakers at the entrance. He was surprised. He had talked with Lon for more than an hour, and it was already past school hours. Why was Zero still here? Looking at the living room, Roland was surprised to see the little girl lying on the ground motionlessly, with 2 broken cups beside her. No way. He quickly walked up to her, squatted down and held her wrist. Her pulse was still beating. He looked at her face. Zero's eyes were closed, her eyebrows were slightly knitted, and her cheeks were flushed as if she was suffering from some kind of pain. Roland tried to touch her forehead and felt a burning sensation in his palm. Is she having a fever? Judging from the way she fell, she probably lost her balance while cleaning the coffee table. Damn it, she was fine this morning. Nevertheless, Roland felt much more at ease. It was better to be sick than to be attacked by fallen evils. When he saw the little girl fall, he almost thought that God had sent his men to seek revenge. Without hesitation, Roland picked her up, ran down the building, and got into the van. The bumpy ride brought Zero back to consciousness a little. She opened her eyes and murmured, "I broke the cup on the table. I saw it. Sorry. I'll pay for it. Don't drive me to the countryside." Is she delirious? Roland put her in the passenger seat and fastened the seat belt for her. Shut up. Don't say anything. Just as he was about to start the car, Zero suddenly reached out her hand and grabbed his sleeve. Uncle, don't go. This was the first time the little girl, who had always been angry at him, saw this. Looking at her pleading expression, Roland could not help but think of the words she had written in her diary. Perhaps the high fever had blurred her consciousness and exposed her most vulnerable side. He did not know how her family had treated her in the past. Thinking of this, he could not help but sigh. Don't worry. I won't let you go before you pay the rent. Hearing this, Zero slowly closed her eyes, but she still did not let go of his hand. After being sent to the hospital, there was a long process of registration, diagnosis, hospitalization, and infodrip. It was already afternoon. Although the little girl's condition was still not clear, her condition had stabilized. It was not until evening that the attending doctor came to see him. Are you really a martialist? Yes. What's wrong? Roland asked. Please don't tease us next time, the doctor said grumpily. That girl isn't sick at all. She has awakened the force of nature. Although it's rare, there are always 1 or 2 people who don't feel well. Didn't the Martialist Association tell you this? What? Awakened? Really, if it wasn't for the fact that a martialist in the hospital happened to notice this situation, I would have thought it was some rare disease. The doctor's tone was full of impatience. You can go through the discharge procedures and bring her home. After tossing and turning for half a day, Roland returned to the apartment with Zero, who was still asleep. Looking at the white-haired little girl curled up in his arms, He let out a long sigh. Awakened? He did not expect that as a former pure witch, even in this world, she still could not escape the favor of magic power. It could only be said that this was fate. Fortunately, he was watching over her in the dream world, so she would not repeat the mistakes of her previous life. At this time, the sky was shrouded in darkness. In the long corridor, there was only a row of old chandeliers giving off a dim yellow light, and the occasional flying insects bumping into the light. When he got closer to 0825, he unexpectedly saw another familiar figure, Garcia. The other party was leaning against the door of his house, sitting in the corridor in a daze. What's going on today? One after another, she came looking for trouble. She told Nightingale that she would only sleep for a short while, and now it was probably almost dinner time. Hey, Roland squatted in front of her. Why are you in the mood to wait for me here? Did you lose your key and want to spend the night in my house? Garcia didn't sneer right away, which made him feel that something was wrong. When she raised her head, Roland suddenly did not say a word. He saw that her face was covered in tears. Chapter 1231. Roland did not come back to his senses for a long time. Garcia's master was called Lon, right? In other words, the woman he met in the Rose Cafe early in the morning was dead? How was that possible? Even if Lon was restricted by the rules of the dream world, she was still a guardian disciple. It should have been easy for her to deal with a few fallen evils. Moreover, the Prism City was built on the basis of a mine, and its main body was buried deep underground. Usually, it was guarded by the awakened. How could the fallen evils attack it? Roland suppressed his emotions and pretended to be calm. He pulled Garcia up and said, "Let's talk in the room." Garcia stood up weakly as if she had lost all her strength. Roland threw the sleeping Zero into the bedroom and poured Garcia a glass of warm milk to calm her nerves. Under the bright light, Garcia gradually calmed down. Although her eyes were still a little out of focus, her tears had finally stopped. Only then did he notice that there were more than a dozen missed calls and 6 unread messages on his cell phone, which he had forgotten to put into his pocket because he had left in such a hurry. He casually scrolled through them and found that they were all from Garcia. "I'm sorry. Zero suddenly had a fever, and I was in a hurry to go to the hospital, so I forgot to bring my cell phone with me," Roland said awkwardly. "What happened in the Prism City? How did you know about your master's situation?" Garcia was silent for a long time, so long that Roland thought she would not speak. Then she said intermittently, "Around noon, I received an emergency message from C02 saying that there was an emergency at the headquarters of the association, and he asked all the marshalists to prepare for reinforcements. If I remember correctly, C02 was the liaison officer of the last joint operation," Roland thought. "That's why she called me so many times. But the reinforcements didn't come? Otherwise, Garcia would have gone to the Prism City a long time ago." "Yes, because the culprit was, the erosion in the middle suddenly expanded," Garcia murmured. "No one saw how it happened, and the surveillance cameras didn't capture the moment when it happened. I heard from C02 that by the time the association realized, the erosion had almost cut the Prism City in half, and we lost contact with the upper and lower levels." "Corrode and expand?" Roland's heart skipped a beat. According to Lon, the bloody moon was a hole created by the erosion. Theoretically, it could appear anywhere, including underground. If the appearance of the bloody moon was the beginning of the battle of divine will, then wouldn't the sudden expansion of the erosion be equivalent to the appearance of the bloody moon in another sense? Has the headquarters confirmed the exact time of the mutation? She nodded slightly. It should be around 9 in the morning. It was almost identical to the ripple that swept across the sky above the city. Could it be that the dreamscape was warning him that forces from the outside world had begun to invade this place? What about the fallen evils? They killed their way out from underground. Half an hour later, Roland had a rough understanding of the whole situation. Realizing that the erosion had engulfed the middle part of the city, the Martialist Association immediately organized a rescue operation. The Prism City was like a huge awl that pierced deep into the ground. Such a structure had excellent defense, But it was not perfect. For example, the ventilation system had to be running at all times to ensure that the middle and lower levels could breathe smoothly. In addition, water, food, and other materials had to be transported from the top to the bottom. Therefore, when the erosion cut the Prism City in half, the lives of the lowest-level workers were in danger. The association's top priority was to find out the scope of the erosion and try to find a suitable passage to reconnect the upper and lower levels. When the Prism City was first built, they had considered such a situation, so they had set up several sets of backup evacuation wells around the city. So far, they had been able to deal with the erosion in an orderly manner. Since the possibility of an enemy attack was ruled out, the Martialist Association naturally cancelled the request for reinforcements. At that time, the guards and the disciples were all there, and the headquarters urgently needed engineering and medical teams, so the Martialist Association, which was of little help to the rescue operation, was put on standby. However, something that no one expected happened. Just as everyone entered the evacuation wells to explore the lower levels, Lan's team in exit number 04 was suddenly attacked by fallen evils. Later, someone recognized that many of the fallen evils were the association's companions who had been trapped in the lower levels. This sounded extremely shocking and incredible. No one knew what had happened in the lower levels of the city in the hours after the connection was broken. However, what appeared in front of them was a group of monsters who had fused with the fallen core. There were both ordinary workers and martialists among them. Those who could enter the lower levels of the Prism City were undoubtedly the most reliable core members of the association. What made them betray the association in less than half a day was still unknown. However, there was no doubt that the moment they fused with the fallen core, they were no longer human beings. Even Roland was surprised for a long time when he heard this, not to mention the shock of the rescue team at that time. As a result, Lan's team was caught unprepared. Lan's team did not have the upper hand in terms of both strength and quantity. Thanks to her outstanding performance, they did not end up being wiped out. However, as the team leader, Lan did not return to the surface safely. When she was closing an isolation door, she was attacked by several fallen evils. Garcia could not help sobbing again. Roland poured her another glass of milk. After a moment of hesitation, he asked the question that concerned him the most. Although it sounded a little inappropriate, he had to find out the truth. This information should have been relayed to the headquarters by the survivors, right? Roland took a deep breath. Did anyone really witness your master's death? Normally, Garcia would have been beaten by this question, but at this moment, she was so confused that she did not realize Roland's intention at all. My master, she blocked the closing door with her body. Then she was torn to pieces by the fallen evils. Many people in the team saw this scene. She leaned on the tea table and cried in a low voice. "Oh, my condolences." Roland could not help but sigh. He did not know what would happen to the people in the dream world after they died. Would they return to the realm of mind or disappear completely? But if God really controlled most of the realm of mind, either outcome would not be a good one. Without the protection of the dream world, it was obvious what would happen to a traitor. Roland could not blame Roland for associating this matter with God. This change seemed to be a trap set up for Lan. Similarly, Lan was not the only target of God. The dream world was the thing that God wanted to destroy the most. Then you have to protect this place. If you lose it, the realm of mind will be closed forever. Roland could not help but think of Lan's warning. It seemed that he would also have to fight a battle of divine will in the dream world. His opponent was neither the demons nor the Sky-Sea realm. He would face God directly. Hold on. A noisy voice rang in his ears. It seemed to be very far away, but also seemed to be right in front of him. What happened? He felt excruciating pain all over his body, and his legs felt like they were broken. This was the first time he had encountered such a serious injury. Even during the promotion ceremony, he had not been in such a sorry state. For a moment he even thought of the word death. Ah, that's right, he was about to die. The vitality in his body was slowly fading, replaced by a bone-piercing chill. His consciousness was like a ball of sand, and it was difficult to concentrate and think. Hold on, the voice came closer. Is someone there? Strange, this language, I seem to have heard it somewhere before. There's still one alive here. Someone help me move this damned stone away. She looks seriously injured, hurry up. 1, 2, 3. In an instant he felt the weight on his body lighten, and then he was lifted onto a soft bed that could be moved. Hold on, you'll be fine, someone said above his head. The association has prepared the best doctors and equipment. As long as you can hold on until you reach the hospital. Hospital? What does that mean? Are these people saving me? Oh yes, you came from the Kargard Peninsula, right? What's your name? My name? Yes, do you remember? He used the last of his strength to reply. Chapter 1232. The square at the entrance of the Prism City. There was a continuous roar of machinery, and spotlights illuminated the ground as if it were daytime. The rescue work had been going on for nearly 16 hours. Defender Rock stood in the temporary command center tent with a solemn expression, waiting for the final news to arrive. Some people said that he was as hard as stone and would never be disturbed by emotions, but this was actually a misunderstanding. Lan's sacrifice made him feel great sorrow, and he even secretly blamed himself for not personally leading the team down. However, he was even more aware of the importance of the matter. Before the situation at the bottom of the city was investigated, he didn't even have the right to feel sorrow. After exit number 04 was attacked, exit number 01 and exit number 05 were also attacked by fallen evils. Fortunately, these people had learned a lesson from Lan's team, and only paid a small price to wipe out all the fallen evils. However, the statistics still made Rock feel powerless. Everything was the same as what happened in exit number 04. The enemies were all the lowest members of the association. So far, more than 320 corpses had been identified, which was almost the total number of people on duty that day. At this point, it was already foreseeable that all the lower levels of the association would be wiped out. He did not know why these people chose to merge with the fallen cores in just a few hours after the disaster. The Prism City had a complete emergency system. Even if the supply from the upper levels was cut off, it could still hold on for a while. They should have known that the association would never give up on any of the trapped people. As long as all the evacuation wells were not destroyed at the same time, they would soon be able to see the light of day again. However, Rock was not in the mood to guess what had happened at that time. He only wanted to know the current situation of the central containment warehouse. Even if all the people on duty had become fallen evils, there would only be about 300 of them. However, there were more than 3,000 cores in the warehouse, which was several times more important than his life. If the information was leaked, the consequences would be unimaginable. Mr. Rock. At this moment, a man in a suit walked into the temporary command center and whispered a few words into his ear. How could we be so unlucky? Rock could not help but frown. According to the report from the rescue team, when the erosion suddenly expanded, there were 2 sightseeing marshalists from the Kargard Peninsula in the Prism City. The central support had been swallowed up, causing structural damage to the city's spine. As a result, the floor closest to the erosion had completely slid into a flat hole. However, the 2 marshalists happened to be near the collapsed area. Based on the current rescue situation, the fate of this group of people might not be optimistic. What should we do? One of the teams has a star martial artist from Kargard. If we don't handle it well, I'm afraid it will cause a diplomatic crisis. Do your best to search and save as many as you can. What else can you do? This isn't something we can control. But according to the Protector's personality, he might not appreciate it. The Rock Ghost King was silent for a moment. I understand. Keep this a secret for now. I will ask the president of Cloud Sky City to coordinate. As soon as the suited man left, a liaison officer suddenly shouted, There's news from Well 01. They've already broken through the blockage in the pipes and are now entering the city. Connect the signal to the main screen, Rock said in a low voice. Understood. After a burst of static, an image from the front line appeared on the main screen. The shaking lens should have come from the leader's head-mounted camera. The lighting under the city was good, but the light was flickering. Apparently, The emergency motor was still working. Based on this, it could be inferred that the elevators and other transportation devices were also working, which could save a lot of time for the rescue. However, no one in the command post cheered. Everyone's eyes were attracted by the abrupt red spot on the screen. Its outline was irregular, but it was perfectly embedded in the reinforced concrete, as if it was an asymmetrical work of art. But Rock knew that it was not a coincidence. Anything that came into contact with the erosion would be devoured without exception, including the force of nature. It was the erosion that split the Prism City into two parts. Ignore the damage to the headquarters for now, he ordered. Go to the bottom floor immediately. I want to ensure that the central containment warehouse is safe. After receiving instructions, the rescue team went all the way down and did not encounter any more enemies. However, Rock Ghost King did not see too many traces of fighting either. It was quiet everywhere, and the furnishings were still maintained in an orderly manner. It was as if this place was not the site of a disaster, but had been abandoned on purpose. When the team arrived in front of the containment warehouse, there was a gasp in the temporary command post. Even Rock could not help but clench his teeth. The body of the other defender, Wrath, had been broken in two. Its upper body was stuck to the steel door that was dozens of centimeters thick, and its clothes were almost burned to ashes. There was a huge hole in the center of the steel door. From the irregular edge, it seemed that it had been drilled by some high-temperature object. Perhaps Wrath had used it as the last barrier to resist the invaders. Unfortunately, even so, it could not stop the enemy from entering the containment warehouse. This was not something that the fallen evils could do. After the team spent some effort to open the door, they found that the area where the fallen core was stored was empty. The command post fell into a dead silence. Everyone stared at the big screen, their eyes lifeless. Sure enough, Rock clenched his fists. He knew that those people at the bottom would not accept the fallen core for no reason. Show me the video. I want to see what kind of monsters these invaders are. His thunderous voice exploded in the tent and woke everyone up. The timely switch of the emergency power supply did not affect the entire monitoring system too much. Except for a few damaged probes, most of the data was intact. The technicians who entered the well later quickly connected the backup storage hardware, and the video data were continuously transmitted to the ground through a temporary optical cable. The higher-ups in the command post also saw a very shocking scene. When the erosion expanded, several balls of viscous blood dripped from the red hole and smashed on the floor below. The liquid-like things twisted for a moment and turned into human shapes. One of them seemed to have the ability to melt everything. In the blink of an eye, it burned through the floor and reached the bottom of the city. There was another monster that was even more terrifying. It could almost control the martialists who came by following the sound and turn them into mindless dolls, looking like low-level fallen evils who had been tempted by the force of nature. In less than half an hour, the entire bottom collapsed. Those who were still alive merged with the fallen core and became the enemy's puppets. After the monsters swallowed the remaining cores, they directly melted a passage in the containment warehouse and disappeared from the camera. It was the first time that Rock had seen such a way of using power, let alone enemies born from the erosion. He could not help but think of the survivors' report from the last joint annihilation operation organized by the association, and the monsters that appeared in the artificial erosion. It seemed that the concept that the erosion could devour everything needed to be changed. At the same time, perhaps the concept that the erosion did not distinguish between good and evil should also be changed. Based on the current situation, these monsters that came from within the erosion and were obviously not fallen evils were full of undisguised hostility towards human beings. However, Rock also knew that no matter how difficult the enemy was to deal with, as long as the martialists worked together, they would eventually find a way to fight it. The most important thing at the moment was to inspire people. If the enemy was too powerful and made people fearful, everything would be over. Everyone, as you can see, this is not a simple accident, but an invasion launched by the erosion. He stood up and said loudly to everyone, "This may sound unreasonable, but the truth is right in front of us. Let me make it clear, this is a war. They have a clear goal, and they came prepared. They just want to take our world. I will immediately contact the local martialist associations and gather all our forces to help the Prism City destroy the enemy. Chapter 1233. Roland stayed with Garcia until about 4 o'clock in the morning, and then Garcia slowly fell asleep. What Garcia said in the middle of the night was almost more than what she had said since he met her. Although it was more appropriate to say that Garcia was talking to herself rather than talking to her. Most of the content was about how she ran away from the Clover family, and how she met and got to know her master Lon. All Roland could do was to refill her glass of milk from time to time, and act as a quiet listener. But he also noticed that Garcia's spirit of justice and dedication mostly came from Lan's teachings, including doing her best to protect this world and never giving up at any time. Although Lan's teachings were very strict, Garcia still regarded her master as her pillar and goal. Putting aside those emotional experiences, at least for now, Lan had a certain affection for the dream world. He just didn't know if the methods she mentioned would work. There were only 2 bedrooms in room 0825, one of which belonged to Zero. Roland weighed the possible risks of searching for the key on Garcia, and finally decided to put her on the master bed, and sleep in the living room. This way, he could let her have a good rest and avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. According to his experience in the GL game, this should be the safest choice, probably. Of course, he didn't really want to spend the night on the sofa. After all, the other side had been asleep for a long time. After settling Garcia down, Roland looked through the bedroom window at the city shrouded in darkness. This was the Dream City at 4 o'clock in the morning. The lights were still shining in the city center, more eye-catching than any stars. Although it looked very peaceful, it was as dangerous as the other world. The bloody moon, that represented the erosion, had already shown its ferocious face. The only difference was that one was hanging high in the sky, while the other was buried deep in the ground. Roland closed the curtains and left the dream world. After a familiar dizziness, he slowly opened his eyes, but the first thing he saw was not the ceiling, but a pair of star-like eyes. After the 2 pairs of eyes stared at each other for a moment, Roland heard a short and urgent cry, and then the figure above him quickly disappeared without a trace, as if it was just an illusion. Ahem, I just wanted to see if you had woken up. After all, you have been asleep for so long. I was a little worried. Nightingale appeared at the desk. Besides, why did you wake up so suddenly? You scared me. Roland was speechless for a moment. What did he mean by waking up too suddenly? Could it be that he could give a hint before waking up? Anyway, it's good that you're fine. I'm going back to my room to sleep. She deliberately yawned. By the way, Anna came to see you at 10 o'clock, but she went back when she saw that you weren't awake yet. She also asked me to tell you not to tire yourself out. Wait, what time is it now? Not long after 12. Nightingale walked to the door of the office. So, good night. Watching the door close, Roland felt a strong sense of tiredness hit him. Although entering the dream world looked like sleeping, the speed of energy consumption did not slow down. In addition, the time flow in the 2 worlds was different. In other words, he had almost not rested for almost 2 days. He stretched and got up from the recliner. When he was about to catch up on sleep, he suddenly caught a trace of strangeness from the corner of his eye. Roland looked at the ceiling of the floor-to-ceiling window, and almost screamed out of fear. He saw 2 pale faces hanging down from the window, clinging tightly to the glass, and even a little deformed because they were too close. 4 dark eye sockets stared into the room, not to mention how many people there were. If he did not feel that the eyes were a little familiar, he was afraid that he would have chosen to run away at the first moment. Wait, familiar? Roland suppressed his pounding heart, squinted and looked carefully for a moment, only to find that it was actually Lightning and Maggie. Why did they suddenly appear here? Moreover, in the middle of the night, the 2 people outside the window seemed to have also realized that their whereabouts had been exposed, and slowly floated down from the roof. When did you arrive in Neverwinter? After letting the 2 little guys in, he asked with a straight face. Why didn't you report to me immediately? When they approached Roland, he noticed that both Lightning and Maggie's hair and clothes were dirty, as if they had not washed for more than half a year, which showed that this investigation was not easy. Your Majesty, about an hour ago, we coup. Before Maggie could finish her sentence, lightning covered her mouth. No, we just arrived not long ago, and we didn't see anything. Then he glared at Maggie. Am I right? Maggie nodded hurriedly. I remembered wrongly. Roland could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Even Nana could not be fooled by such a poor performance. But it did not matter even if she said that they came back early. Anyway, he did not mind being watched while he slept. You were on the road all night? Why didn't you use animal messengers? Is it? He suddenly had a bad premonition. Yes, Your Majesty, Lightning said seriously. Just half a month ago, we found traces of senior demons on the ridge of the continent. Roland's drowsiness was instantly swept away. And then? Did you see any outposts or anything like that? Not yet. Lightning shook her head and took out a crumpled map from her bosom. She spread it on the desk and said, the terrain there is not suitable for us to go further. We had to turn back to the snow ridge and meet with the tequila witches. It took them a lot of time to set up the magic core, but they finally confirmed one thing. She pointed to a landform in the center of the map that looked like a gap. There is indeed a God's Stone of Retaliation mine here, and its scale should be similar to that of the holy city of Tequila. Since there were senior demons and a God's Stone of Retaliation mine, the conclusion was self-evident. Roland could not help but frown. The Pearl of the Northern region had guessed correctly. The enemy had prepared for both sides from the beginning. Although the Tequila was suitable for attack, it was also a place that humans had to fight for. Even if they accidentally lost it, they could invade the Four Kingdoms from another direction. After all, no matter how difficult the impassable mountain range was, it was better than waiting for another 400 years. Fortunately, the humans were one step ahead of them in discovering the demons' intentions. According to the information provided by Agatha, the obelisk needed some time to fully mature. Before that, the red mist it produced could only cover a small area around it. But when we left the snow ridge, we heard another news. Lightning said hesitantly. At that time, Maggie and I had already crossed the border of the Kingdom of Everwinter. The voice in the sigil of listening was very vague, so we were not sure if it was true. What did you hear? Maggie put her hands to her ears and held them like a receiver. Chapter 1234. Barav was woken up by a servant from his dream. During the period when the bloody moon appeared, not only did he arrange people in the administrative office to be on duty overnight, but he also asked his servants to inform him as soon as there was any unforeseen emergency. Although Edith had been transferred out of the administrative office, she still had influence on His Majesty. Now, even his subordinates tended to ask for the opinion of the general staff before making a plan. Facing such a talented opponent, he dared not relax for even a moment. However, this was not the only reason why he worked so hard. In fact, the old director even enjoyed the feeling of being busy. Being busy also meant power, which meant that the operation of Neverwinter was inseparable from his existence. At the same time, if he did a good job, he could gain His Majesty's trust. The double happiness made him somewhat happy. Barav rolled out of bed and asked while changing his clothes, "Tell me what happened." "Sir, it's His Majesty's order. He wants you to immediately summon all the ministers to the castle's conference hall to discuss important matters." Now, Barav looked out of the window in surprise. It was undoubtedly late at night. Yes, the person on the phone didn't say much. Do you want to send someone to the castle to ask? No need. The old director quickly made a decision. Since the call from the administrative office could reach his mansion, it was unlikely that it was a mistake. Since telephones were still not widely available, only he had one in his residence. The others had to be informed verbally. Call everyone in the mansion. Go knock on the door in batches. All the department heads must be informed. If you miss one, I will hold you responsible. If it was Prince Roland in the past, he would have hesitated. However, His Majesty was now an impeccable king. If he decided to hold a meeting in the early hours of the morning, then it must be something extremely important. Yes, sir, the servant hurriedly replied. Are you going to the castle alone? No, I'll go with the Pearl of the Northern Region, Barav replied. I'll inform Edith Kant myself. Your Majesty, almost everyone is here, Nightingale said as she put a coat on Roland. Do you need me to make you a cup of strong tea? Sorry to trouble you. He nodded. I've only slept for a short while, and now I'm calling you over. That's nothing, Nightingale said with a smile. Besides, I'm in good spirits. The previous yawns were all faked. You're pretending? No. She suddenly remembered something and quickly changed her words. I mean, although I yawned a few times, it was because my eyes were a little dry, not because I was sleepy. By the way, aren't you going to call Anna along? Let her have a good sleep. Roland shook his head. She doesn't need to worry about this kind of thing for the time being. Besides, she's exhausted. In order to quickly turn the magic cube engine into a reliable new generation of power source, Anna spent almost all of her time in the North Slope laboratory. Coupled with the imminent production of the biplane, the pressure was unimaginable. The same goes for you. Nightingale handed him a cup of strong tea. The time in the dream world wasn't a rest at all, was it? Don't worry. I'm quite talented when it comes to staying up late. Roland said with a smile. Irregular work and rest was a common thing in his era, and this level of tiredness was far from the limit. He just needed to make sure that he got enough sleep. Besides, if I don't tell them everything, I won't be able to sleep even if I lie in bed. He drank the slightly bitter tea in one gulp and let out a long sigh. Let's go. When Lightning recounted her investigation experience for the past month in detail, the conference hall was silent. Everyone no longer looked sleepy, but became incomparably dignified. Agatha looked at Roland with a bitter face. Your Majesty, It's not Tequila's fault, Roland comforted. Whether it's the increase in the number of senior demons or spider demons, it shows that the enemy is completely different from 400 years ago. Obviously, we humans are not the only ones who are improving. It was meaningless to blame Tequila for the wrong information. After all, Tequila did not have the ability to predict the future. In a sense, their knowledge of the demons and ghosts in the Third Battle of Divine was not much different from that of Neverwinter. Although the exploration group can't confirm that the red mist has appeared for the time being, if it really crossed the peak of desperation, I think there will be new news from the front line in less than a week. The problem now is, if the enemy really has the ability to activate the obelisk immediately, how should we deal with it? Before we discuss the answer, I want to confirm to what extent a fully matured obelisk can expand the red mist. Agatha hesitated for a moment before saying, Ever since we found the mutant demons at the bottom of the mineral vein, the Union realized that the essence of the obelisk is probably a kind of giant magic stone. If the small magic stone embedded in the demon's body is transformed from the chaos beast, then the obelisk can be regarded as a part of the ore pillar. Although it has the ability to grow, the limit of its maturity is still related to the size of the mineral vein. However, Roland saw her hesitation and said, It doesn't matter. It's better to have some clues than no clues at all. Besides, there is no fixed situation in the war. If the result is different from the reality, we can adjust it when the time comes. You're right. The Ice Witch nodded and looked more natural. According to the accumulated experience of the Union and the location of the mineral vein investigated by Lightning, if a godstone mineral vein as large as Tequila is transformed into an obelisk, the red mist can almost spread to here. She condensed an ice crystal on her fingertip and pointed to a corner of the big map on the table. This is the line of Archduke Island? Edith asked thoughtfully. That's right. If we move the location of the Great Rift Valley to Tequila, this border is almost equivalent to the impassable mountain range. Agatha explained. Of course, this is not something that can be achieved in an instant. It takes time for the red mist to spread. It only takes a few days to cover an area of about 100 kilometers, but the further it goes, the slower it gets. It will take several months to cover the 100 kilometers before it reaches the limit. Now it seemed that it was a good thing that they had conquered the Tequila ruins in advance. Roland could not help thinking. Not to mention the fact that the impassable mountain range would be rendered useless by the red mist, and the four kingdoms would not be able to defend themselves. Even if the First Army had only laid the railway 10 kilometers into the ruins now, the offensive of the First Army would have been greatly hindered by the red mist. In particular, the red mist was a fatal threat to the witches. Fighting in such an environment was equivalent to blindfolding the eyes and ears of the army. Even if they had the advantage of shooting range, they would not be able to make full use of it. It seems that we have to race against time, Roland said as he looked at Edith. Does the General Staff have any plans for this? Of course, Your Majesty. The Pearl of the Northern Region could be regarded as the brightest person in the conference hall. After all, she was the first to guess the demon's intention. Although the enemy moved faster than we expected, from a strategic point of view, erecting the obelisk on the ridge of the continent was a helpless move. Although it's hidden enough, it's not suitable for attack, so we still have a chance to recover. First of all, everyone in the General Staff agreed that if the enemy really appeared from the direction of the Kingdom of Everwinter, our last line of defense should not be Grey Castle, but here. She pointed at the map. Chapter 1235. The reason is simple. Edith did not wait for the others to ask and directly explained. The Cage Mountain is a horizontal branch of the impassable mountain range, and it's also the highest point on the border of the Kingdom of Dawn. This idea is similar to the original impassable defense line. With the advantage of the terrain, the First Army's artillery can have a wider attack range, and the enemy's mobility will be limited. After all, the number of flying devil beasts is far less than the lowest mad demons. Secondly, according to the tequila, the red mist is more likely to gather at lower places, and the closer it is to the edge, the weaker it is. Therefore, it's easier for the witches to establish a defense line at the highest point. Based on the information we just received from the front line, this is a precaution. Lastly, His Majesty's Dawn plan. She paused and looked around. We all know that this plan depends on the ores in the Cage Mountain. Before we find other substitutes, the Cage Mountain is an area that we can't give up. No one in the hall raised any doubts. None of them had ever seen the final product of Project Dawn, and it was difficult for them to imagine just how much energy those tiny balls contained. Roland's words made them one of the core goals of their future strategy. Roland couldn't help but feel extremely gratified. This was probably the highest ideal in the mind of a technical dog. But we can't completely give up on the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart. Roland looked at Edith and said, to win the war, Grey Castle needs a large number of people. Yes, so during the period from the appearance of the red mist until it completely disperses, the First Army's main task is to migrate the population and delay the enemy's advance as much as possible. I don't think the demons will wait for the red mist to slowly disperse. It's very likely that they'll take advantage of the momentum to build a large number of outposts, just like 400 years ago. The Pearl of the Northern Region paused for a moment and said, to be honest, the First Army is helped by the Bloody Moon's sudden advance. When they see the real enemy of the foreign races, the people of the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart will naturally know which side to choose. At that time, even if Ironax refuses to let them in, I'm afraid they'll beg to come to Grey Castle. At this point, she raised the corner of her mouth and revealed a meaningful smile. Even so, many people will die. Roland sighed to himself. In a sense, most human beings were indeed like this. He could faintly feel Edith's joy at this moment. It was probably similar to the news in the future, where the residents of the residential area who boycotted the signal tower finally got their wish and lost their cell phone signal. But before this battle of destiny, he couldn't just sit by and do nothing. This year, the Golden Twos in various places should have a great harvest, Roland instructed Barov. Come up with a plan to transport some food to the Kingdom of Dawn to ensure that the refugees who have fled from the occupied territories have enough to eat. Your Majesty, if I'm not mistaken, once the intelligence is confirmed, the main force of the First Army will soon move towards the Cage Mountain, which will put a lot of pressure on the logistics. I'm not sure if I can deliver food to the refugees on time while transporting the army's needs. Even if I rent all the ships of the Chamber of Commerce in the fjords, it may not be enough. This was an unavoidable problem. Even the largest sailing ship in the fjords was far from enough in a full-scale war. Currently, the rented ships were already operating at full capacity just to transport the refugees. Unless we can build a direct railway to the neighboring country, Barov said hesitantly. Obviously, he was well aware of the cost of such a large-scale project. Every time he had to use the National Treasury's funds, he was more reluctant to do so than to cut his own flesh. I'm afraid there's not enough time. Roland shook his head. Furthermore, Neverwinter has invested too many resources in the railway on the fertile plains. If we replicate it in the Kingdom of Dawn, it will affect the production of other projects. From the Misty Forest to the Tequila Ruins, the long river of steel that stretched across the fertile plains had consumed countless amounts of steel, and 1.5 years of the construction period. This was under the condition that the first half was repaired by Leaf and the second half was built on flat land. The terrain between Neverwinter and the Cage Mountain was obviously not as clear as that of the fertile plains, so it was difficult to estimate the construction period. Your Majesty, I think so too. Barov heaved a sigh of relief. Let's make a plan based on the current situation. Don't try to save money. We can use most of the Golden Dragon. It's not the time to be stingy, Roland said. As for the logistics, I'll think of a way. Yes, Your Majesty. He then looked at Edith. In principle, the idea of using the Cage Mountain as the dividing line is feasible. The General Staff should come up with a plan as soon as possible, and then we'll have a meeting to discuss it. For the Pearl of the Northern region, this was a routine procedure. He also believed that with her talent, she would be able to sense the urgency of the matter even without him saying much. Please leave it to me, Edith said with her hand on her chest. Roland stood up and glanced at everyone in the hall. I've said before that the Third Battle of Divine will be a war that will determine the fate of all human beings. Now it's here. The victory of the Tequila War is enough to prove that the defeat 400 years ago is not irreversible. I hope that everyone can fulfill their duties and play an indelible role in this war. History will remember this day, he said loudly. Listen up, no matter who the enemy is, I only have one request. This war must be won. As you wish, Your Majesty. Everyone replied in unison. It was destined to be a sleepless night. As everyone left the castle conference hall, Roland stopped Tilly. I have something to talk to you in private. After returning to the office, Roland asked Nightingale to leave first, and then closed the door. Tilly raised her eyebrows. Even Nightingale can't hear you? It seems that you're not here to ask me about the training of the Aerial Knight Regiment. He did not answer. Instead, he poured a cup of iced peppermint-flavored chaos drink for each of them. The taste was not top-notch, but it had a good effect in easing one's mood. Seeing that Roland did not speak, Tilly did not ask further. Instead, she sipped the drink as if she was waiting for him to break the silence. Roland stared at his nominal sister with mixed feelings. Compared to the former Princess Tilly, the current Tilly Wimbledon seemed to be much calmer. She was more like a leader, both in terms of expression and behavior. However, compared to her current appearance, he still preferred to see the little girl nestled beside Anna in the middle of winter, casually tiptoeing, flipping through a pile of books, laughing and discussing how to come up with a question that would stump her other sisters. If that was all, it would have been fine. After all, people couldn't always look the same. However, Tilly's change was too fast. From the time Ashes sacrificed herself to the time when she cried in grief, in just a few days, she had completely lost that layer of childishness. Not only that, her hatred for the demons was deeply engraved in her eyes. Although she rarely mentioned it, Roland felt a strong uneasiness from her only request. It was an extremely resolute attitude. It was as if the whole world had lost its color to her. Now he learned from Lon that everything was not irreversible. Considering the trustworthiness of the information from the realm of mind, the safest way was to let Ashes come back to life before telling Tilly, so as to avoid great disappointment. However, he also realized that based on Tilly's current state of mind, it was very likely that she would not be able to survive the battle of divine will. If he told her, she might be able to recover. But if he couldn't achieve it in the end, he would fall into even deeper despair. It was because of these two entangled thoughts that he could not speak at the first moment. However, no matter how long the silence was, there would always be a time limit. Roland knew that by calling Tilly over, he had already made a choice. Compared to regretting it later, he would rather put his future hope on the present. Brother? Tilly looked away, probably because she had stared at him for too long. Roland took a deep breath and said slowly, "Maybe what I'm going to say next sounds a little unbelievable, but I still want to tell you." Chapter 1236. Tilly's body trembled. She turned her head slowly and looked at Roland with a complicated look in her eyes, as if she had misheard. "What did you say?" "I said, Ashes may still be alive." Roland repeated as slowly as possible. He knew that once he said it, there would be no turning back. "No. Brother," she forced a smile. "Even if you want to comfort me, you can't." "But this kind of life is a little different from what you imagined," Roland interrupted her. "To be honest, when I heard the news, my reaction was not much better than yours. I also know that it is a little unfair to you to reveal it to you before it is completely confirmed, but in any case, it is better than regretting later." Tilly shut her mouth. She stared straight at Roland as if she was digesting his words. At this point, she realized that this matter might be unusual. In terms of sensitivity and ability to accept things, Tilly had always been one of the top witches. After about a quarter of an hour, she asked tentatively, "Who told you this?" "Lon. I've never heard of it." Tilly thought for a moment. "Is it related to the dream world?" Roland was indeed a person who could talk and laugh with Anna. "Don't worry, I'll tell you the details one by one." When he finished, the sky was slightly brighter. The soft morning light peeked out from behind the mountains and dyed the roofs of the buildings in the distance with a layer of gold. Tilly was unaware of this. She murmured, "That is to say, as long as I can control the realm of mind, I can summon Ashes, who still has a trace of her consciousness." "Theoretically, yes." Roland nodded. "According to Lon, when a witch becomes a transcendent, she will leave a trace in the realm of mind, which is consistent with the information revealed by Caberdabi. When she first interrogated the captured senior demon, it had told Zoe that their souls would be contained by the origin of magic, and when the race reached the peak, they would be able to return to the world. Although the source of this explanation was unclear, and it was quite different from Lan's explanation, there was at least one thing in common. The realm of mind did indeed have the ability to contain souls. Not only that, but the ancient books of the underground civilization also mentioned that the path of pursuing the divine will is a process of climbing the magic power ladder step by step. One day, the winner will be no different from God. If we view the realm of mind as the pinnacle of magic power, then it can also support Zheng Lan's theory. He paused here. However, considering that the source of information for these civilizations may come from the so-called gods, we can't completely trust them. The best way is to see for ourselves. Big brother. Don't worry, I will break through the barrier of the realm of mind as soon as possible and try to find Ashes, if she's really there. But before that, I hope you can protect yourself, lest she comes back to find trouble with me. After all, if a transcendent who is not restricted by the god's stone of retaliation, and has broken through her limits gets angry, I won't be able to handle it. Roland deliberately said some light-hearted words to ease the atmosphere, but he found that Tilly's reaction seemed to be a little strange. She lowered her head, her shoulders twitched slightly, and she softly repeated something. Roland held his breath before he could clearly hear what she said. That's great. That's great." He was speechless for a moment, not knowing how to continue. Tears fell on the back of Tilly's hand, splashing a few tiny droplets. Looking at the trembling Princess Tilly, he finally sighed inwardly. He slowly reached out his hand and pressed it on her head. The next moment, Tilly leaned over and hugged him tightly. The twitching also turned into obvious sobbing sounds. The scene now seemed to be the same as before, but Roland could feel that something had changed. This time, Tilly did not cry for several hours. After more than 10 minutes, she gradually calmed down. When she raised her head from Roland's arms, she forced his face to the side. Don't look over." Then there was the sound of cleaning. probably wiping the crying flower's face and snot. After a while, Roland was allowed to turn his head back. "I'm sorry. I made you worry," Tilly said in a low voice. "It's good that you know." Roland crossed his arms in front of his chest. "You should reconsider the matter that I mentioned to you last time." "You mean a plane that can deal with the demons?" Tilly blinked. "That's not possible, big brother. Hey, in order to reach the bottomless abyss as soon as possible, you need my help. Now that the demons have probably erected a fully matured obelisk, the devil beasts will be even more difficult to suppress. If we can't seize the sky, I'm afraid that the First Army won't be able to destroy the enemy's territory so easily." Tilly stretched out a finger and stopped Roland from speaking. "Indeed, I used to think that as long as I could kill as many demons as possible, it would be good for me. But now I don't think that way anymore. And you should also know that there's a big difference between learning by yourself and having someone to guide you. No one in the aerial knight knows how to fight the demons. The only one who can quickly grasp these skills and teach them is me." She patted her chest. "I promise you, I'll wait for the day you enter the realm of mind in one piece." Roland found himself unable to say a word of rejection. At this moment, Tilly's eyes were full of brilliance, and her previous calmness did not fade much. She looked as if she was glowing. "Okay, but remember what you promised me." "Of course." She paused for a moment. "And thank you for telling me about this." "Unfortunately, I don't know if this method will work in the end." "That's enough. At least we have a goal now." Tilly gently rested her forehead on Roland's chest again. "It's great that you can be my brother." After Tilly left, Nightingale returned to the office. "What did you say to Her Highness Tilly? When I saw her go out, she seemed to have changed into a different person. If you want to know about the connection between the dream world and the real world, I can tell you, but not now." Roland tidied up the blueprints in his hands. "I just received a message from Honey. A fleet should arrive at the river port in 2 days. It should be the first batch of immigrants from the Kingdom of Wolfheart. Before that, I have to perfect the blueprints for the new project." Nightingale shrugged. "I'm good no matter what. Didn't I tell you before? If you don't want to say, I won't ask." She walked to the desk and studied the blueprints for a while. "This thing is a little similar to the thing Anna drove in the courtyard the other day." "It's the same thing, just a few times bigger." Roland smiled. "Didn't Barov mention the logistics problem in the previous meeting? It's the solution. Aside from the expensive train, there was also an even cheaper type of transportation, wheeled trucks. There were many variations of them. Although they could not compare to trains in terms of carrying capacity, they were more flexible and had lower barriers to entry than tractors. As long as there was a flat, hard road, they could travel freely." Chapter 1237. "So that's how it is," Nightingale thought for a moment. "Compared to building a complete railway, it is much easier to lay a hard road between 2 rivers that are not connected. Besides, Anna and skilled workers are needed to build the railway, but ordinary roads can be built by anyone. Even the newly arrived immigrants can do it. In this way, we can save a lot of time." "Yes, this is another advantage of it," Roland said approvingly. "As long as it is properly planned, the logistical pressure can be alleviated in 1 or 2 months at most. This is very important for us, who need to seize every second. It seems that you can sometimes think of the key point of a problem." "Haha, of course. No." Nightingale's smile faded quickly. "What do you mean by sometimes? As long as I think about it seriously, I can do it too, whether it's helping you with official business or dealing with exams." Although she said it confidently, the second half of her sentence was obviously lower than the first half. Roland could not help but chuckle. Perhaps for Nightingale, the only way to think about it seriously was not to fall asleep. Roland turned his eyes back to the map on the table. The fastest way to connect the waterways of Greycastle and the Kingdom of Dawn was to build a road directly to the city of Evernight at the eastern bend of the Redwater River, and then go all the way north through the windward ridge of the Kingdom of Dawn to connect with the neighboring Sparkling River. This river originated from the Hermes Plateau, and the main river divided into 3 parts at the Old Holy City. Two broad tributaries traversed the Kingdom of Dawn from north to south and finally merged into the sea. In order to further utilize the shipping resources, the Moya family had built 3 east-west canals in the past 100 years, which was equivalent to adding 3 more horizontal lines to the 2 herringbone tributaries. This greatly facilitated the commercial circulation in the Kingdom of Dawn, and also provided a shortcut for Roland, from the Sparkling River to the North River, and then build a road directly to the Cage Mountain. There would be a special passage between the 2 places that were thousands of miles apart. Compared to the expensive railway line, this plan only required the construction of 2 sections of hard road, which added up to less than 200 kilometers, and 3 supporting loading docks. Considering the destructive power of the trucks on the road, if they only relied on the lotus to pave the road and the workers to scatter gravel to tamp it down, it wouldn't take long before people would be sent to maintain and repair the road. Heavy rain would cause the road to collapse even faster. Therefore, Roland decided to use cement-stabilized sand as the hardening layer, which was the same size as the roads in Neverwinter. Cement was no longer a rare commodity in Neverwinter, but transporting it thousands of miles to the Kingdom of Dawn was still a time-consuming and laborious task. Rather than wasting transportation capacity, it was more convenient to produce on the spot. After arranging the blueprints, Roland wrote a letter to the acting king of the neighboring country, Andrea's father, Horford Quinn. He decided to dispatch some technical personnel to the city of Glow to teach the 3 big families of the king's city the cement calcining formula and the steam paddle ship assembly technology, so that they could build factories and repair roads to share the burden of Neverwinter. He believed that the nobles would be able to see the potential and value of cement. With these 2 technologies, the transportation problems in the Kingdom of Dawn could be solved by the nobles themselves. As for the steam engine itself, it would still be provided by Neverwinter. It was not that Roland was reluctant to pass on the core technology, but that other cities had no industrial foundation except Neverwinter. It would be meaningless to have the technology, but still need to transport the raw materials. It would be better to send the finished products directly. Roland was not at all worried that Horford would pretend to agree but secretly oppose him, or that he would not put in the effort. If the red mist had really appeared on the impassable mountain peak, Horford would soon hear about it. At that time, he would naturally know what to do to make a wise choice. 2 days later, Roland witnessed the arrival of the first batch of immigrants at the top of the Miracle Building. The long fleet was almost endless, and the black and white smoke column seemed to form a high wall perpendicular to the river bank. The dense crowd stepped onto the trestle and entered the dock under the guidance of the police. For a time, the Redwater River was filled with people rubbing shoulders, and colorful heads filled all the open spaces. A total of 50,000 people. "You've basically moved an entire city, Your Majesty," Bear sighed with mixed feelings. "I never thought that I would see tens of thousands of people from the Kingdom of Wolfheart, or the Kingdom of Everwinter in Grey Castle. At this rate, I'm not at all worried about the annual growth target of 200,000 people, but your treasury. There's also the problem of public security and management," Chief Knight Carter said worriedly. "I'm afraid that these foreigners know little about your prestige. For the safety of the inner city, I suggest that they be isolated in a specific area, so that it will be easier to control them. That way, they will never integrate into Grey Castle." Roland shook his head. "If the police are short of people, ask Bear for them. Those who break the law will be severely punished. Those who do outstanding work will be rewarded, and those who refuse to mend their ways will be sent to the mines. What I need are workers, not a group of supervised slaves." There was no doubt that the influx of a large number of foreigners would significantly reduce the security of the king's city, which was also one of the inevitable side effects of the rough population introduction plan. If he had more time, he would not want to do this. However, what he lacked the most now was time. Even if there were all kinds of hidden dangers in the plan, he had to carry it out. After all, compared to the benefits of the population increase, these side effects were not worth mentioning. For example, if 10,000 of the first batch of 50,000 people worked in the factories, the existing ordnance production scale could be doubled, which meant that the front line could obtain more weapons, ammunition, and other new equipment. At this moment, he had all the manpower and technology, and could officially start the new generation project based on the Magic Cube power unit. Where is this place? When Valkyries woke up again, he found himself lying in a snow-white room. Both the ceiling and the walls were dazzlingly bright. A strange instrument beside him kept making monotonous beeping sounds, as if it was some kind of timer. A bag of transparent liquid hung above his head, slowly dripping through a pipe. Valkyries noticed that the liquid seemed to be constantly flowing into his body. A large amount of strange information flooded into his mind, making it difficult for him to effectively respond. There were scenes that he had never seen before, or rather, even if he had seen some things before, it was difficult to associate them with the images in his memory. For example, the white short shirt he was wearing, the stitches were as fine as hair, completely different from any other clothes he had seen before. He closed his eyes and focused his attention on himself. No matter how strange it was, everything in his eyes was just an external object. Since he was in a strange place, the only thing he could rely on was his powerful ability. Then Valkyries' heart sank. He realized that this body did not belong to him. Although it looked exactly the same, the magic stone embedded in his body had disappeared. If this really happened, he should have died immediately. But now he did not feel any discomfort. Magic power was still slowly flowing in his body, in a way that he had never heard of before. At the same time, he could no longer feel the whispers from the realm of mind. No matter how hard Valkyries concentrated, even if he put down his pride and called for the Sky Lord, he did not receive any response. Chapter 1238. Yes, it was trapped. Valkyries gradually began to recall it. At that time, it was following the faint fluctuation, going deeper and deeper into the realm of mind. After crossing the boundary between the shallow and deep layers, its consciousness would find it difficult to move forward. Not only did it have to fight against the turbulent currents, but the resistance would also suddenly increase, as if it was struggling in a quagmire. It was the first time Valkyries had entered such a deep area, so it had to be very careful. If it lost its way, it might never be able to leave. If not for the increasingly obvious fluctuation, it would have stopped its pursuit and turned back to take a breather. After all, the area was getting smaller and smaller, and it was only a matter of time before it found the entrance. But at that time, it decided to persevere a little longer. First, Hacksword seemed to be dissatisfied with its behavior of resting in the red mist pond all day, especially when the birth tower had been successfully transplanted, and the humans had yet to react. Second, it wanted to find out as soon as possible whether the changes in the humans had anything to do with the inheritance. Valkyries did not expect that when it approached the source of the fluctuation, the realm of mind suddenly shook violently. It felt as if mud had suddenly turned into a waterfall, or a huge crack had appeared under its feet, and the viscous deep layer had completely collapsed. It did not even have the chance to struggle before it was sucked into the turbulence. When it woke up, it found itself in this place. Without a doubt, this place was also a part of the realm of mind, but it could not be sure whether it was related to the male human. Through the corner of the window, Valkyries could see an extremely vast city. Tall buildings as tall as the birth tower were everywhere, and it could not see the end of them at a glance. Even the kings presiding Holy See seemed to pale in comparison. Another thing that made it suspicious was that if this was really the male's territory, he should have sensed the existence of the intruder the moment it was sucked in. The creator of the territory had omnipotent power, and it was also the mortal enemy of the humans. It was impossible for the other party to remain indifferent until now. From another perspective, if the consciousness of a witch accidentally intruded into the presiding Holy See, perhaps death would be the most merciful ending. But the problem was, if this territory had nothing to do with the male, then where could it be? When the tremor came, it was indeed above the source of the tremor. Unless it found the wrong clue from the beginning, it couldn't think of any other possibility. Valkyries pondered for a long time, but still could not figure it out, so he simply threw these questions to the back of his mind. Since he could not get an answer, there was no point in thinking about it. In an unfamiliar environment, it was best to adapt to the new body as soon as possible to escape from the predicament. One thing was certain. Its new body was far weaker than before. The wounds on its legs had yet to recover, which showed that its self-healing ability was extremely low. Coupled with the fact that the magic barrier did not work, it had not experienced this feeling of being defenseless for a long time. It felt as if it had returned to the beginning of the advancement ceremony, when anyone could pose a threat to it. Fortunately, it could still use magic power and possessed extraordinary strength, which was somewhat similar to the extraordinary among the witches. Just as Valkyries was checking his condition, he suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. Then, the door was pushed open, and two humans walked in with smiles on their faces. It almost subconsciously wanted to pounce forward and tear the newcomer in half, but when it raised its elbow halfway, it forcibly suppressed it with its will. This was not the real world. It reminded itself that when it was in a coma, it seemed that it was also humans who saved it. Perhaps the so-called demon did not exist in the minds of these people. If it acted rashly, it would expose itself. You seem to be in good spirits, Miss Valkyries. The female lifted a corner of the quilt and checked her tightly bound feet. You are indeed a martialist. You didn't even hurt your bones after being crushed by such a large beam. If it were me, I'm afraid that both of my legs would have been crushed into pieces. How can you speak like this in front of a patient? The male glared at the female and then looked at her. I'm your attending doctor. Just call me Dr. Gao. Judging from the X-ray, it's only a matter of time before you recover. Don't worry, as long as you take good care of yourself, it won't affect your future martial arts competition. Also, if you feel any discomfort, you can tell me. Valkyrie shook her head. She did not understand most of what the male said, so the best way to deal with it was to speak less. Moreover, she noticed that these humans were very friendly. They did not look like they were sizing up a different species, which puzzled her. Even if there was no hostility, there was a huge difference between the two species. How could they talk to each other on equal terms? Valkyries even noticed that the female seemed to be particularly interested in it. Her eyes never left its body. That's good. The male who called himself Dr. Gao flipped through the booklet in his hand. The association has a consolation arrangement in the afternoon, and I heard that there will be a meeting in the evening. I've already canceled the meeting for you. Those people are really too much. They still want you to go in a wheelchair when you're injured like this. That's just nonsense. But I can't refuse their consolation. After all, this hospital is run by the Martialist Association. It's impossible to stop them from coming in. Fortunately, you only need to lie down. Thank you. It replied in a human tone. You're welcome. The male smiled. Oh right. It must be boring sitting here. After all, the association didn't bring your phone along when they sent you here. Do you want to watch some TV to relieve your boredom? Phone. TV. What are these things? Valkyries was speechless for a moment. It didn't know how to answer. The male probably took its silence as a tacit agreement. He picked up a small square box on the bedside table and fiddled with the blackboard on the wall. Soon the blackboard lit up. Then have a good rest. Dr. Gao waved his hand and left the room with the female. Valkyries stared at the scene on the TV with its mouth agape. It almost couldn't maintain its composure. How did it do that? The picture on the blackboard changed again and again. Whether it was a person or an object, everything was vivid and lifelike. If it was using magic, it wouldn't be strange. But this was clearly not a magic creation. From the beginning to the end, it couldn't feel a trace of magic fluctuation inside the blackboard. It took a while for Valkyries to get used to it. It realized that the content shown on the TV was related to the small square box. As long as it pressed the direction button on it, the TV would show different things. If it guessed correctly, the content was probably closely related to this world. It was an effective way to learn about this strange world. While it was flipping through the TV, it heard a special word, Martialist Association. According to the words of the male human, it seemed that Valkyries was also a member of the association, or perhaps it had been mistaken for one. The TV was broadcasting an empty space filled with people. From a bird's eye view, It was probably caused by a magical object similar to a magical stone of flight. Today is the third day since the attack on the Prism City. The rescue and cleanup work are still ongoing. According to the announcement of the association, the number of victims has been basically identified, but it will take some time to verify their identities. During the whole rescue process, many martialists showed their extraordinary courage and responsibility. They went deep into the evacuation wells many times to search for the trapped people. Among them, Ms. Lan, the chief disciple who guarded the rock, sacrificed her life. When she entered the number 4 well, she was attacked by the fallen evils. In order to protect her companions, Valkyries didn't hear what was said on the TV in the back. Its eyes were fixed on the picture on the blackboard. Why? Valfries's heart was in turmoil. Why did she see this familiar yet strange face in the realm of mind? Chapter 1239. No, Valkyrie shook his head and calmed himself down. The Cloud School had indeed ceased to exist. This was an undeniable fact. Ever since it occupied the northwest of the Land of Dawn, it would return to the mountain every 100 years and stay in the dilapidated building for a day or two. This was because it used to be a member of the school. On the mountain, it not only learned how to connect with the realm of mind, but it also learned a lot about the human world. The person who taught it was an upgraded transformer, Heathtolis. Heathtolis' combat ability was not outstanding. It was even weaker than a strong primal demon, which was a joke among the race. However, Valkyries knew that the difficulty of the upgrade ceremony would not be reduced just because the magic stone was not suitable for battle. Heathtolis had undergone 3 integrations and was impeccable. No matter how one looked at it, it was a real upgraded. Just like its name, the transformer gained the ability to change its appearance when it fused with the second magic stone. So it rarely showed its true face. Most of the time, it was in a human form. Coupled with its fluent human language, if one didn't know its background, they would most likely mistake it for a human when meeting it for the first time. And the appearance it used the most was that of Lan on TV. Valkyrie stared at the face, countless memories surging in its mind. It had been more than 1,000 years. Even though there were slight differences in the facial features and clothing, it would never forget this face. If the ancestors who established the Cloud School were said to be unusual among humans, then the Transformer was an unusual among them. When it chose magic stones, it did not care about how much it could improve its strength. It was full of curiosity towards anything that it had not tried before. It was also the first member of its race to take the initiative to contact the Cloud School. At that time, there were already rumors of a battle of divine will in the race, and they viewed the humans who occupied the Land of Dawn as a potential enemy. Valkyries had always been grateful to this guide who had taught it most of its knowledge. It did not look down on her just because she was not good at fighting. It knew very well that the Transformer's acceptance and understanding of the realm of mind, which was also the origin of magic, was far greater than that of other members of its race. More than half of the books it had written were used to guide the race to upgrade. According to the humans, it could be called a mentor for most of them. In fact, the Transformer might have been the first to accept the 4th fusion. If it succeeded, it would become the first great monarch of its race. Primal demons were few and far between back then, let alone great monarchs. Unfortunately, the ritual ended in failure. It was devoured by the magic power and died without a corpse. Valkyries remembered this scene clearly because it was right beside the man, and saw his body disintegrate bit by bit with its own eyes. This was also the reason why it felt that Lan was unfamiliar. In the 1,000 years since then, it had never seen anyone similar to her. Valkyries had asked the Transformer why it had become like this. Unlike the simulated human appearance, it was sure that this face did not belong to any of the sages. It could not understand the other party's reply at all. It said that it was the appearance of an oracle. As for who the oracle was, the Transformer said that it did not know either. When it used its ability to enter the realm of mind, it would occasionally encounter a consciousness that was obviously different. The consciousness seemed to be whispering in its mind. Although it had never met the consciousness, it could remember the appearance of the consciousness afterward. The transformer also said that this might be due to its lack of ability. If it could open up a stable area in the turbulent realm of mind, it might be able to connect with the oracle. At that time, Valkyries could not understand the meaning of the transformer's words at all. It had not been long since it became a junior, and its understanding of the realm of mind was still a blank. It could be said that the transformer was hundreds of years ahead of the other races in this aspect. It was not until the Second Battle of Divine Will that the king achieved this and successfully left a domain that belonged to him in the realm of mind. It had also asked the king if he had seen the oracle, but the king had given a negative answer. After thinking about it calmly, there might be two possibilities in the current situation. One was that this domain belonged to the oracle Lan. But according to the content on TV, Lan seemed to be dead. This did not make sense. As long as the creator of the domain did not leave the realm of mind, the creator of the domain should be immortal. The second possibility was that before the transformer was devoured by the magic power, it had put its consciousness into the realm of mind and successfully opened up a domain. Although this speculation could explain why it was not strange for humans to see it, it could not explain the large number of decorations around it that it had never seen before. If at the beginning, Valkyries only wanted to leave this strange place as soon as possible, now it had other ideas. It had always been brooding over the words that the transformer said when it failed the fourth fusion. According to the transformer, even if they won the Battle of Divine Will, the race would not be able to reach the divine domain. It had been trying to figure out what had made its teacher say something like that. Maybe now was the opportunity. Yawn. Roland held the steering wheel with one hand and drove the van quickly on the second ring highway. Although he tried hard to step on the accelerator and the engine roared, there were still cars passing him and leaving him further and further behind. What's wrong? Didn't you rest well? It was Garcia who was sitting in the passenger seat. He did not know if it was an illusion, but since she fell asleep in his room last time, her voice seemed to have softened a lot. The cafe is closed today. I wanted to sleep until the afternoon, but the association really knows how to pick a time. Roland could not help but complain. After dealing with the immigration matters, a strong wave of sleepiness swept over him again, almost making it difficult for him to open his eyes. Considering that the time flow in the dream world was almost 3 times faster than in the real world, he decided to come here and have a good sleep. This way, he could not only save time, but also let the tequila witches relax. Now that they did not need him to look after them, they could have their own fun. In addition to enjoying themselves, the ancient witches also took on the task of tracking the new magic creatures that emerged from the erosion. He did not forget Lan's words. This world had been targeted by God, and the most effective way to eliminate the threat and break through the barrier of God's realm, as soon as possible, was to kill the fallen evils, and use their power to replenish and strengthen the dream world. Dreams were beautiful, but there was always a gap between reality and reality. At noon, Garcia called him and said that the association had organized a condolence action. All the star marshalists and senior members of the association would be there to visit the injured companions who had been rescued. At that time, he thought it was just a one-sided invitation from Garcia, and wanted to find an excuse to refuse. He did not expect that the association would not invite her, but him, who had a hunting license. After all, the Prism City has suffered a great disaster, and the people are anxious. It's also a way for the senior members to show their faces. Garcia raised her eyebrows and said, "I think the general meeting tonight should be the real focus." Roland fell silent. The erosion had suddenly expanded, and it was definitely not enough to appease the people. The more turbulent the situation was, the more they had to show their strength. At this time, if they could not deal a fatal blow to the enemy, they would not be able to do anything. Therefore, the general meeting was most likely related to the new magic creatures. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.